welcome to what we hope will only be the October 2nd, 2018 meeting of the Board of Selectmen, although looking at this agenda, it may also be the October 3rd, 2018 meeting of the Board of Selectmen. As always, this meeting is being video recorded. Apparently something else is as well, so, all right. We want to take a moment of appreciation for our troops serving in the Middle East and around the world. Thank you. Just note there is a potential for an executive session at the end of tonight's meeting under exemption number 2 for the purpose of conducting a strategy session in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, discussion and possible vote on compensation or other terms and conditions of an employment agreement to be offered to new town administrator Christine Trueweiler if the board has so voted with respect to the appointment of Ms. Trueweiler under the other open meeting agenda item. All right, our first appointment, Greg Bonnet, in regards to a proposal to host a cyclocross bike race at the Medfield State Hospital site in December.
Great.
Welcome, Mr. Bonnet.
Thank you very much. I have some hard copies here for you.
Oh, wow.
So we are prepared to discuss the finer points.
We've gotten emails lobbying in favor of you already.
I apologize.
A groundswell for cyclocross in Medfield.
There's a, there's quite a bit of excitement about this. So I have with me here my friend and teammate Chip Baker as well, who's going to be filling in some of the details around race promotion and any of the finer points, but I'll take you through the general proposal. Again, my name's Greg Bonnet. I live at 1 Maplewood Road. A member of a pretty vibrant local cycling community we have here in Medfield, and as you probably have seen in some of your emails, a lot of us are excited about hosting this event at Medfield State Hospital. Just a little bit of background on the second slide or first slide. It was suggested maybe we explain what cyclocross is, because it's not exactly a very popular or a common concept. Cyclocross racing is basically a mixed terrain bicycle race event, typically done on a road bike style bicycle, but mountain bikes are used as well. It's a short course event done over, again, a mix of terrain, so pavement, dirt, grass. There'll be points where you'll dismount the bicycle and jump over obstacles, things that have been put on the course intentionally, like logs and barriers and that sort of thing. It's quite popular in New England. It's actually the fastest growing segment of bike racing in the US right now. In New England, it's home to over 50 events in the season, which is typically September to December. And we actually are home to count many national champions in the event. So it's pretty exciting. We're excited about having this here, and the community locally is very much active in the cyclocross racing scene. So, any questions there?
Nope.
Great. We're very interested in.
I do have a question. It says many laps of 1.5 to 2 miles.
Yes. So it's a timing-based race. So typically on the pace of how the race is going, the experts will race close to an hour.
Like an hour.
Yeah. Novices will race for about 30 minutes. The laps can vary based on the general pace of the race. So that the actual distance of the race is often decided mid-race.
But it's like 20 to 25 miles or something like that. It's
Not
not-
even
No.
that much really, so you figure the lap is probably like a mile and a half, and then,
Oh, sorry. The lap is probably a mile and a half, and then if the people are doing an hour, maybe they could be doing 10 laps possibly.
Okay.
For that reason, it's a great spectator event because you get to see everybody multiple times, so it's a lot of fun. We're really excited about hosting this at the MSH grounds just because the setting is amazing. The aesthetic of the historical buildings, again, the local population being so excited and invested in an event like this. The grounds themselves logistically are perfect for an event like this. Lots of open space, lots of varied terrain, ample parking, lots of flat ground. And then the town in general has a very strong reputation as being a cycling-friendly community and an active outdoor community. So we think it suits the character of the town quite well. Just a little bit about the promoters. Unfortunately, Colin Reuter could not join us this evening. He is kind of the lead promoter of this event. Their other large event that Chip co-promotes with Colin is actually tomorrow out at Ski Ward in Shrewsbury, and that attracts 500 plus racers. Colin is the president of the New England Bicycle Racing Association. They're the local agent for USA Cycling, which is the national governing body for all competitive cycling. He's got 15-plus years in race promotion. Probably Chip and Colin combined have 35-plus years. And the team they have there is one of the most professional, experienced promotions groups in New England. They have a very strong following and a very strong brand. So, any questions there? Great. If there's any questions about concerns or references about land use and what to expect, happy to provide references, especially from Ski Ward. The ownership group there has been very happy. They've been running the race at Ski Ward for 10 years. The race we're talking about promoting this year in Medfield has been running for 8 years, roughly?
Actually, that one's a little, I think this will be the 11th year.
11th year, okay. So, long history of a lot of fun and no incidents or anything like that. In terms of the event itself, we're proposing a date of Saturday, December 8th. The racing itself would take place from roughly 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. There's many, many races throughout the day. The categories are broken up by age and experience level and gender as well. And there's a few open categories in there as well. The events will typically draw, and historically this event draws 300 to 500 participants. And the nature of cyclocross is all weather, so snow, rain, or shine, as you can see in some of the pictures. In terms of the course layout, you can see on page 7, Colin has drawn upon his extensive experience in course design and managing many different features to put together a course that we feel showcases the aesthetic of the grounds, and then puts together a safe course with close proximity to parking, no need to cross Hospital Road for parking, so keeping things really consolidated and simple, ample accessible spectating on level ground throughout the course, and also complying with USCC guidelines. So we're not dealing with any sort of excessive pitches or anything when there can be snowy or icy conditions this time of year. What you can see highlighted on there are a few different areas. We have parking highlighted in red. If you kind of look closely, you see team tents annotated there and a pit area. It's typical to have a pit area where a racer can store a spare bike, or somebody who is kind of coaching for them can provide them assistance or support if they have a mechanical issue on course. And then you'll see marked along the course, which is moving in a clockwise direction around the grounds, a number of obstacles that are there by intent, some short barriers, some logs. There's what's mentioned as a run-up, would be a point where someone dismounts to run up a short hill, all very common to a cyclocross racing event. Any questions or concerns about the course layout?
Just looking at where it is on the map, I can't, it's not actually on the roads at the state hospital.
It crosses them at points, but we try not to have any extensive paved portions. It's a bit more fun to be more off-road. So, but the nature of the event is mixed terrain. It's very common to have a little bit of pavement in there.
So after the event is held, what does the course look like? Because you're basically going across mainly grass areas. How's the grass hold up?
The grass will be typically beaten in. If there's weather or wet conditions, it can get muddy. As standard practice, we employ mitigation issues for any turf damage. So at that time of year, it may be difficult to reseed, given the grass is going to be dormant. There may be snow cover, which may mitigate some of those issues. We would put a plan in place to revisit the site during the spring planting season to repair any damage. So
Okay. If it's frozen, then it would be
it'd be
minimal
pretty
damage.
hardy, yeah. And again, happy to provide references from other landowners that can speak to the nature of those remediation issues.
It's the most squiggly, I never would have imagined such a squiggly course.
It's tough to pack 1.5 miles into that area, so you have to really manage the terrain.
Are there any security, I mean, obviously you're gonna have a lot of spectators here. I'm thinking of the normal weekend traffic or dog walkers and people that are just there, people
Yeah.
flying drones. Are there security issues, not like serious security issues, but are there crowd security issues or anything that we should be concerned about?
We've never, I think in the history of the event, had any crowd unruliness, security issues there. I think what we would recommend, and what's in here a little bit later, is to post notice of the event a number of weeks in advance. The grounds have become so popular with even commercial dog walkers, and we just want everybody to know well in advance that The grounds will be open and accessible, but just not in the same way they are every day.
So that was actually the security question. Do we
Okay.
tell the dog walkers to go find another place to walk
Just
that
for
weekend, or do
one
we
day,
allow-
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think we would recommend on the Saturday, that we, largely close off the area to the dog walkers if we can, so.
And where do you think the parking will be?
We would leverage the existing paved parking lots, if that's okay, or the parking, out front, the dirt lot, along Hospital Road. Really, we're open to suggestion on where you'd prefer that to happen, so.
How many people do you think will show up in addition to your 300 to 500 participants?
Typically, maybe 100
Not, yeah,
spectators.
maybe 100 more. They
Yeah.
usually all come in one car. Typically, people will, pack into a car and carpool like that. So it'd probably be 300 to 500 cars. Well, not 300 to 500 cars, but probably half of that because people would carpool.
Yeah,
So half of that as cars, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Potentially, yep.
I mean, that time of year, I think people could probably park over at McCarthy Park as well. There won't be much going on there.
For
It did s-
the number of cars we park with the car show, my guess would be, we might want to actually designate
Right.
a park. It probably could be
Yeah.
a pretty convenient parking area up in the front there, but
Yeah.
rather than have people have to go across the street and have all that cross, if it's. totally-
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be, from the walkthrough that we did there, that front section where it sounds like that's where the auto show parks their cars in the front there on that grass. If that could be accessible to parking, that would be good.
Yeah, my only thought was if it's too wet or muddy.
Oh, that's-
Or snow,
that's
it's-
true. Yeah,
yeah.
you're right,
in there,
you're
it's
right.
gonna-
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times with these events, you face that, and we're used to parking on different types of terrain.
So yeah, if the ground were hard, we'd easily park the cars up there. If it were soft, you would
Yeah.
go across if you had to.
There were some questions around, again, potholes on the pavement, safety issues. First and foremost, everybody wants all participants to have a good, safe time at the event. We never want to design a course that's going to encourage injury or any harm to anyone. That's not fun for anyone involved. So the course design is intended to mitigate that. The races themselves are limited to a specific number of riders that's regulated by the USAC to again, encourage safety in the event. Obstacles are clearly marked and are quite obvious to participants. And then any hazards are also marked, mitigated, in any way as well. So we're really, focused on the safety and the risk mitigation around the event.
Do the participants sign a waiver?
They do, actually. So on
Would
slide,
include the town?
does it include the town?
It could include the
It could,
town.
yeah, we could add, we could modify the
Usually
language.
whoever, whether it's a private property owner or like with Ski Ward, it's a private ski hill, they're on all of our insurance, and they're included in that.
Yeah, I'm sure would want to be a named insured.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, you would be
Yeah.
covered completely.
Yeah. So I think we'd like to be covered in the waiver, too.
Sure. You would be.
So, yeah, to that extent, on slide 9, the USAC will provide general liability coverage for the event. Those are sample coverage limits there. We can get into the finer details of that as we negotiate the contract. And again, all participants will sign a binding waiver of liability. In terms of vendors and spectators and what to expect there, for parking, this is largely a volunteer-driven effort, so we leverage volunteers that dedicate their time to help organize the event and manage folks flowing through, and that would include parking attendants that be dedicated to that task. We'll have a public address system there for an announcer. We have a live race announcer calling the races and kind of speaking to what's going on and make it more fun for the spectators. And there's also some music kind of playing in the background throughout the event. We'll bring food trucks, one or multiple, on the grounds to make sure people are well fed and happy. Past precedents that we've had in doing this event over the last decade, typically an open, tailgate style, bring your own alcohol policy has presented no issues to us in the past. And then also can be kind of chilly that time of year. It's nice to have a few warming centers. So we've done barrel fires or fire pits contained in the past. So
Can't have alcohol on town property without some kind of license having been issued.
okay,
Yeah, there'd have to be a separate license for that.
separate license for that. Do you require a licensed vendor or a?
Somebody will have to act to kind of have the umbrella hold the license.
Okay,
That's in the town charter that we,
okay,
For purposes, I think what you're saying is people that come and they tailgate, they bring their own stuff.
it would be tailgate or picnic style. They'd bring
Yeah.
bring their own
So-
beer and spectate, that sort of thing.
So we wouldn't require them to have a particular, we wouldn't require that they sell the alcohol?
It's not an alcohol licensure issue as much as it's the town charter prohibits alcohol on town property unless it's been a license issued for it.
Okay.
But would we be permitted to license it for
Give them a one-day
this style,
license.
one-day license for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So it doesn't, I don't think we'll impose a vendor on you,
Okay, great.
in a sense, but.
So we just need to obtain a single-day license to permit that activity. Okay,
Right.
great.
Mark, do you understand warming fires are probably a good idea, but given that this is on the campus,
That's a fire chief of
okay.
issue.
If we had to obtain a
There may be limits
permit,
on what we can do.
Yeah, permit, or if we required somebody to be dedicated to tending to that, a named person, we're happy to work with any requirements the fire department presents.
So, yeah, I think you'll just have to talk to the fire chief.
Sure.
About it.
Sounds great.
Okay. Do we have a problem with volunteer parking attendants? I can see, I'm trying to think, when we had the Fall Fest, I think that was all volunteers that handled the parking. I'm wondering whether it matters whether the parking is across the street on Hospital Road, whether we need a police detail or.
When we did the fireworks up there, we just hired the Boy Scouts basically to do the parking for us, and we paid them to do it.
Okay. I guess the more general
Volunteers.
question is there anything about what we're seeing here that would cause us to think that we need a police detail? Whether it's the size of the crowd, the alcohol on the premises, people crossing the street if they're parking across, or are we okay with not, with trusting the volunteers?
Did we have one with the car show?
Thought we
There
did,
were
but
police
there was
there
a
when
lot
I
of
went by
traffic.
running in the morning, but I don't know if it was a detail.
I think we required that there, but there's a lot of traffic. It's a little different.
Yeah, that was a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we just check with the police chief.
I would check with the chief, yeah.
Can we check with building and grounds? I'm just gonna throw it out there.
Yeah,
We haven't
I
gotten
think-
there yet,
yeah,
Bill.
yeah.
We have, that's a.
But that's a good
question
idea.
Coming up. Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay. Yeah, I think historically, we haven't required a police detail for these events, but we'd obviously be open to that if that was a requirement of the town, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's in some events where, like what you're talking about, if the parking is on the other side of a street
Yeah.
and the crowd is really big, you're going to want a police detail. I mean, obviously, because it's going to help with the ebb and flow of traffic.
That was really what.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Great. I think we covered some of this, but course setup and breakdown, if there is, the course would need to be mowed, the grass areas ahead of time. I'm not sure of the schedule of the groundskeeping there. We may not need to do anything. If the grass has grown out and it is not cut short, we may seek to employ the same grounds crew or someone to assist us with that. And the same might go also for snow removal, if, God forbid, there's snow at that point in time.
Okay.
The course will be laid out and taped the Friday before the event during the day and set up there. And then breakdown will occur that evening after the event is commenced. And then we'll do a final walkthrough, make sure that there's no remaining trash or anything like that. The grounds are clean. And as we said before, put in place, if there's any sort of turf damage, make sure that we put in place a schedule and a timeline to make that, to remediate that, so.
Mr. Sorrell.
Yeah, I reviewed the town bylaws, and it's not an alcohol license per se. So if you license the event, then you could or you could include a condition that would permit open alcohol consumption.
And to Bill's question, we had a Buildings and Grounds Committee for Medfield State Hospital led by John
Okay.
Thompson.
Yes, John and I have been corresponding, so, yes.
What's the outcome of that correspondence? Does he have a view on this?
John suggested I obtain approval from the Board of Selectmen, so
Okay, so he doesn't have an opinion about
he
it?
does not, no. To the best of my knowledge, yes. Yeah.
Did he have any reservations about any part of it?
Initially, in our correspondence, he did. He was concerned more about the condition of the pavement. His initial assumption was that a bike race, I think, would take place on the paved areas, which could be dangerous. But after some dialogue around the nature of the event, he recommended we then speak to the board, so.
So his concern was more for the safety of the riders on the pavement than the safety of the pavement from the riders?
I can't speak to the accuracy of that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
And just for background, we had actually, Chip and another promoter had scheduled to run this event last year, and the filming of the movie ended up superseding the date that we had originally had earmarked for the event, so.
Yeah, myself and he's a promoter. He does a bunch of races in Walpole at Adams Farm. He does the really big mountain bike race down there, and we wanted to put this type of race there. And we'd met with him, we did a walkthrough, he seemed very positive about the event being there. We talked a lot about the different buildings and where the race would go through and how that would work. And then, right as that, we were sort of wrapping that up, then that X-Men movie was filming there, and I think that was a year or two, right? So that kind of, and then we revisited it recently, so
Yeah.
that was the.
Too bad you couldn't get them to ride a bike.
It would have
race
been
in
great to have done it,
Midway.
yeah, right, with the actual X-Men movie, that would have been great.
We'll only charge you half of what the movie paid.
Yeah, I would, well, yes, our budget might be a little lower than Marvel. It's true.
I'm assuming that the holiday thing is the week before, because that's usually the
No.
first weekend? No?
That's the weekend of the tree lighting and the parade, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that right, Gene? That's
the-
That is right, the Angel Run is the Sunday prior.
Yeah,
Right.
It's split this.
and the Angel Run and the holiday tree lighting are split this year.
Okay.
But the holiday stroll is the night before this.
Number 7.
Number 7,
So people could make a weekend of it. coming
Yeah.
out to it.
It's
So
a
is this on
destination.
Saturday or-
Yeah.
Promote it, yeah, co-promotion.
Yeah. We're happy to cross-promote the tree lighting.
They're competing against the parade, I guess.
Well, I mean, that's a logistical thing that you may want to run by the police chief.
Yeah,
I mean, the parade runs from, starts at the high school, right? It runs from the high
right.
school.
12, is it 12 to 1 or something, I think?
Yeah.
Simply a matter of the manpower that's available to
Yeah.
cover everything.
Although the people the police that are involved in the parade seem to be the auxiliary. It's usually Tom and people that aren't the regular police officers, it seems to me.
Excellent. Just in terms of postings and signage, typically, again, we'll post a race today sign the day of the event, and as we discussed earlier, I think it would be advisable to post an announcement in advance of the event, so.
We might want some parking. I don't know how big the crowd is. 600 people. I'm not sure if that's 600 cars. It sounds like it's not, but.
I don't think so.
No.
Whether, I don't know whether we want to think about parking signs to tell people where to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And again, we'll have attendants there as cars are coming in, funneling through a single entrance point, and then parking cars to maximize the density there as well. So.
Right, because the car show, I mean, the total number of cars is in the thousands, right? Between the cars that are on the
Yeah.
display and then the ones that are actually parking. I mean, that's a much bigger crowd,
Yep.
right? That's,
I never saw how many people came to the car show, but there were a lot of people walking around. I know.
yeah, yeah.
So this is like the 11th, or 11 of them you've done. Where have they been in the past?
The past few years have been in West Warwick.
Yeah, the past 3 years have been down in West Warwick. We've done it in Rentham, we've done it up in Rowley, up near Ipswich. So a couple of different venues, yeah.
So that
Sorry.
the way that it works with this cyclocross is that you grab a date then and you just have it every year at
Right,
that
yeah,
date
so-
and then it moves around to
Yeah,
wherever
with
you.
this race, we stick to the date, and it's moved from different venues for some different reasons. Initially, it started in Rentham at a very small farm, that White Barn Farm, and we just outgrew that pretty quickly because that's a really small space. And then it just, logistically, it's had to move around for different reasons, yeah.
So, and your date, how do you pick that? Is it the first or
so the-
second Saturday of the?
Yeah, the schedule, it's sort of, as Greg was saying, cyclocross is very big in New England. There's up to 50 races, so there's this NEBRA that Colin's the president of. They create a schedule because there's so many races, they're trying to find the right dates. And we have to work around UCI races, which are these international races, and then the smaller races slot into those open dates, yeah.
So for us, we have these two big events, the Angel Run and the holiday tree lighting and the holiday stroll at the first weekend or two in December. Is there any way that your event could be pushed back a week?
Do you mean moved out off the date of December 8th? You mean more towards like whatever the
a
next
week
weekend
later.
would be? I'd have to check with Colin. I think there's some reasons. So the Federation, USA Cycling does a national championship every year, and I think the date on that has moved. It used to be it would be the first week in January, and I think for international reasons they've moved it back into December, and I don't know where that falls now. It could be that second week in December. That may be why we're on this date.
So I'm just thinking ahead. I mean, it may take us several years to develop the state hospital site. We're not making a lot of
Coming off that
progress.
limb here, Pete, come on.
But I'm assuming you might want to come back and
We
so
love that. I mean, like I said, with
so
ski
that
ward,
if we
I mean,
institutionalize
yeah,
it,
I
it
mean,
might be good to institutionalize it on a day
absolutely.
that doesn't
We would
conflict with our other
prefer
events.
to stay in one venue, like with the race we're going to put on tomorrow, we've been there for 9 years in a row. It's advantageous to everyone for us to stay in the same venue year after year. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Because
that's
you're-
actually part of the impetus and the excitement around this. You know, we do see the development is forthcoming, and we view this as perhaps our only opportunity to do an event like this in the town. So that was also one of the reasons there's a lot of excitement around
Well, you
this.
could move it across the street to the land
could,
on the
yeah.
other side of the street.
Is it a season, you know, as you're talking about going from the 8th of December to the 15th of December, get into January, and is there a season, like, there must be at some point that it gets to be into the dead of winter and,
Yeah, so it is seasonal. It starts, cyclocross, the season starts in September and then stops usually mid-December, and it's a little predicated on, again, when the national championships happen, because all these people who are going to try to become the national championship in cyclocross, they want to do a race like kind of right before the national championship so that they're, peaking for it. So we try, and our race is typically the last race of the season, so we try to coordinate with that date.
I mean, I'm thinking, that given the two distinct locations for the tree lighting and holiday parade, I don't think there's a physical issue here.
No, I don't think so.
If it's an hour long for that.
Yeah,
it
I don't,
doesn't seem to me
yeah,
that's
we
a
shouldn't create any conflict, and we can work with whatever police
The
detail.
tree lighting is the night before anyway. I mean,
Yeah,
it's-
yeah, if anything, it would maybe add to the festivities of the weekend
Yeah,
more than
yeah,
anything, so.
and from some respects it would. I know that back in when I was running Medfield and doing the fireworks on the same day, that kind of made it hard for the police, because it was such a long day.
One possibility is we could potentially draw detail from outside of town as well if there was a resource issue, so.
Right now, it doesn't necessarily sound like we'd need police there anyway.
Yeah,
That all goes through our police department too, with a,
Yeah, I think logistically, this year especially, I don't think we'll have to cross the street, and I don't think there'll be a huge traffic issue.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Okay.
very nice presentation. by
Thank you
the way.
very much.
So I think we have a couple of details to work out. I mean, I think I would like to get just the no objection report from the Building and Grounds Committee, just if, they're not gonna have a concern about the condition of the dirt or the grass or what have you. Before that, we have to work out a price for the license and all
Correct.
that, the scope of the license. You have to talk to the fire chief about the warming pits. We'll need to talk to the police chief about detail. I think it sounds like a good idea to me, and
Okay.
I think, I don't know about Peter Gus, I don't know that we can vote on it right now, only because we do have those details to work out, and I would like to get at least confirmation, or not necessarily confirmation, but sort of a weigh-in from John and his committee, just to make sure they don't have.
Of course.
What's gonna, or if they wanna give a call to one of the outfits that run, what does the grass look like after
Sure.
you do this? I mean, it's
you
probably
may
fine.
want to run the possibility of alcohol consumption by the police chief
Yeah.
as input too.
So we'll need to just run those details down. When do you need a firm decision from us by?
As soon as
2
possible.
weeks is reasonable?
Okay, so our next meeting is October 16th.
October 16th, okay.
So we can give you a yes or no
Yeah.
then on the license, and if you could be in touch in the interim with the Assistant Town Administrator, Christine Truweiler, who sort of handles the logistics for the state hospital, and
Okay.
can go over, we have a standard agreement and everything else for renting the
Okay.
hospital grounds for a day and all that. Have you gotten any of that, or?
Not yet.
Okay,
I'll
so you have
see
to get
to
all that kind of
procure
stuff
that,
and work
yep.
that out and figure out with the police chief and the fire chief what else you want in there. But
Okay.
certainly, I would like to have this happen. It's great to have anybody up there doing anything. So I think it sounds good to me, like a lot of fun.
Excellent.
Yeah, my general.
Bill, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, both, if you don't mind.
Oh, you pick one.
D, all of the above. So my first concern was about physically where it was going to be, and I just saw because I was concerned about making sure it stayed on town property, that we didn't get onto DCR property, that we stayed away from the overlook that has an activity and use limitation that still hasn't been written yet, and basically it's a cap to landfill, and we don't want anybody riding down there.
Yeah.
I would point out that the campus right now is the main access to the overlook, which is DCR property. If you're going to close the property access to dog walkers and whatever else, I think you may want to let DCR know that the overlook is closed that day, or DCAM.
I wouldn't think we'd have to close the overlook.
I think people could still get there.
Yeah, I think it's-
On the outside, right? I think you
Well,
can go right along.
that's fine.
Yeah, but your eyes are good, I mean, we ought to.
The issue is if you decide you don't want
Sure.
the typical 25 or 30 or 40 cars a day that go through the property coming in off the road, you look at your route and decide whether the access is in your way.
Okay.
And then if you do decide you need to close it, I think you need to let the state know that you're closing it. Or the town will have to let the state know that it's being
That's
closed.
one thing to close, fair.
Yeah,
If-
that's,
We can close the course, but if you want to close the entire site, we need to know that.
yeah, I think our preference would be to provide access to this site. I think that's our default, so.
The other thing I would suggest you try to get a meeting with Building and Grounds. I mean, this is the kind of thing they deal with all the time. DPW, who obviously has an interest in the property, the police chief and the fire chief are all on that committee. So rather than approach them separately, if you get a meeting of the committee in the next 2 weeks, present your case to the Building and Grounds Committee. I'll leave it to the selectmen to talk to Building and Grounds and John Thompson and see if you can get the meeting going. The other thing that occurred to me, I
I've kind of two comments so far. We're going to get to the question? or-
yeah. So I'm going to make, I basically, the questions were answered in terms of, indemnification for the town, in terms of injury or anything else, the issue of the license and Christine working on the license, those kind of questions that I had were answered. The issue of restoring the grounds after race, it was another one of my prime concerns. I want to point out that as far as the sledding hill goes, everybody's working very hard to keep any kind of traffic
Yeah.
off the sledding hill. It's already taken a beating by illegal people who are driving on the property illegally down the slope. So,
Yeah, that's why I want to stay off that. I want to stay on the pavement and that part of the park would be better.
Yeah.
yeah. And then the final concern would be parking at the top of the sledding hill is also a problem because that area is pretty soft.
I think we can stay completely on the other side of the road.
So but you can discuss that with Building and Grounds. My main question is, will the selectmen get Building and Grounds to schedule this on for a meeting?
We can ask them to schedule a meeting
Yes,
and hope they will.
thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Oh, can
Thank
I
you.
ask
Oh,
another
sorry.
question? Is there an entry fee for this? Is there money involved?
Yep, there's an entry fee. I don't nominally.
Probably in the $30 range. Oh,
Yeah.
Probably in the $30 range.
And if you're just coming to watch, is there a charge?
No, of course not. And part of it too is typically these races, you don't close off the whole, like there's big races in Gloucester at Fort Stage Park, which is a scenic overlook area. People still go there. It's not closed to the public by any means. It's just for safety reasons on the course itself, especially I don't know if you allow dogs off leash at Medfield State Hospital or is it on leash?
No, we have a leash law.
So if it's off leash and that's the policy, that can be problematic if it's not under, if it's not under control. A loose dog on a bicycle race course is
Pretty
not
dangerous.
optimal.
Yeah.
But
Added
so,
obstacle.
yeah.
That's true.
Depends on the kind of dog, right? All right. Anything else for Mr. Burnett? Mr. Burnett, Mr. Ryder, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. I think the Medfield Energy Committee has the most people here, and so we'll turn to you next.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. There are three of us here from the Energy Committee. I'm Fred Davis, 82 Bridge Street, and the major subject I'll be glad to talk about is signing
Four.
of documents.
There are four.
Four, including Pete. Thanks, Pete. The signing of the documents to purchase the streetlights, for the town to purchase the streetlights from Eversource, so that we can then convert them from high-pressure sodium to LED. So Mr. Sorrell had come up with, had read through the documents and reported to us issues that he found, and so perhaps, Mark, I don't know if you want to go first before I respond, or what?
Thank you. I reviewed a draft purchase and sale agreement and a draft license from Eversource. I noted my comments and reduced them to a written memo to the Energy Committee, which was intended to lay out legal issues and concerns, and also to simply bring to their attention things that were included there for purposes as lay people, making sure they understood the consequences of various terms. As far as the legal issues that are of concern to me, there is some open-ended reference to the ability of Eversource, either at the time of the execution of this agreement or at some later date, to impose an attachment fee, a pole attachment fee on the town for the fixtures. There's also a reference to Verizon having an interest in the town, which, as I understood, they don't. So I met with several members of the Energy Committee and went over my memo and expressed my real concerns, and was authorized to communicate with General Counsel for Eversource, which I did. And I can give you copies of that, just so you have it summarized, what my position was.
Oh, thanks.
He came back, this is all by email, because he's out of Connecticut. He came back with well, I told him, let me put it this way. The memo that I had circulated somehow made its way to him. And he got back, so he initiated contact with me, raising questions about, well, what's the town's position? I can't tell from this. So I initially responded with an email that said, this was never intended to be a negotiating instrument, it was to educate the committee. I'll meet with the committee, I'll get back to you. However, the one issue or the major issues I feel are involved have to do with this attachment fee and its vague reference to Verizon. He alluded at that point to the fact he would take that back to Eversource. I then met with the several members of the committee, and I followed up with this email, which, in fact, the committee confirmed that I had valid issues that ought to be addressed. He then came back to me, unfortunately, with an email that said, I forwarded these, however, the decision maker at Eversource is on vacation, and it dovetails with my vacation. It'll be a couple weeks before we can get back to you. So that's the status of it.
I have one question about this, before we get too much further into it. Did you confirm whether or not there are Verizon poles?
No,
There are not.
it hasn't been confirmed. I assume that's information, it's in their standard contract. Now, it may just be that that's a cut and paste issue, or they know something we don't know.
Mike has always said that the poles in town are owned by just one utility. and
Well, I know that, but the utilities are, they're like a little closed group. They have information that isn't generally available to everybody else. So you need them to confirm one way or the other. If it's Eversource's agreement, they've got the language referencing Verizon. Either they have a reason for it being there or they don't. If they don't, take it out. If they do, what is it? Because that's not consistent with our information. So that's, and the concern is that leaves it to the town to deal with Verizon and possible expenses there, which is why it absolutely needs to be pinned down. And then, so the issue then was, the Energy Committee has a consultant, this was communicated to him, and he came back with an email purporting to address my concerns, and I'll let Fred deal with that as he wishes to. But anyway, my position is what I've just laid out, what's summarized in that memo to Eversource's legal
So
counsel.
if I could summarize your summary, you think there are still open questions to be resolved?
Correct.
Fred?
Can I
So,
just,
yes.
before you start, Fred, Mark, can you give me the Verizon issue again? It's just a question of identifying the Verizon poles, or is it something beyond the identification of the Verizon
Well,
poles?
there's consequences that'll flow from that if there are Verizon poles in this mix. If they're not all Eversource poles as we believe they are.
And the consequences are that we can't attach to the Verizon poles?
Well, Eversource has no authority to contract on behalf of
Yeah.
Verizon, and in fact, they've reserved Verizon's rights, whatever they are, in the document.
Yeah. All right, got it.
And
Thank you.
Eversource is basically suggesting that they may choose to exercise their right to charge an attachment fee in the future, which at least you would expect that would be an option that Verizon would also.
Yeah, and George Woodbury addressed that issue of the fees.
So I'll just note, since the issue is, I recuse myself from anything that involves Verizon. Since our assumption now is that there are no Verizon polls, I'll proceed in that assumption. If it confirms that there are, I'll recuse myself from anything further with respect to it as it relates to Verizon. Since it's an open factual question, we're not making any decisions tonight, I don't think I need to recuse myself from that. Pete or Gus, do you have a disagreement?
No.
I think I need to recuse myself.
That's fine.
Mark,
Thank you.
is that okay? If I don't
Sounds
recuse
good to
myself?
me.
Okay. All right, Fred, back to you.
Okay, so none of us are here acting as lawyers to discuss the legal part, so I very much appreciate that we have Mr. Sorrell acting on behalf of the town to review the documents legally. And you'll see at the end of my comments that from the investigations that I did subsequent to our meeting, I'm not sure anybody else has a Mark Sorrell. We may be unique in Massachusetts. Of the 351 cities and towns, you'll see what I mean in a minute. But I know more about nuts and bolts, so in terms of who owns which poles, all I can tell you is this, that each town has what's called a DPRS, which is the chart of every single pole, the address, the number of lights, the wattage of each light, and that's the chart that behind the scenes is from what Eversource calculates their charges to the town. So what we're doing in this process, after we take ownership, we would then be changing the wattage at each of those poles. You know, the old wattage becomes the new wattage. We change the chart. We then send that back, that DPRS, back to Eversource, and that becomes the basis of our the calculations for our utility bills each month from then on. So I don't know the legality of the DPRS, but the nuts and bolts happen at the DPRS. It's a simple chart. So now I'll go, we reached out in 3 different directions to see what we could find out about the issue of pole attachment fees, which Mark said was the most serious of his concerns. And those 3 directions, and I'll do them briefly. One is our consultant, George Woodbury, who consults nationally, even internationally, on the subject of street lighting in general, LED street lighting in particular. He says the issue of potential pole attachment fees has been in their agreements, in Eversource's agreements, since 1999. When it was first proposed back then, we soundly defeated it at the DPU. He was working for the town of Lexington at the time, and they went to bat at the DPU and had it defeated. The same arguments, meaning the ones they went through back then, are as valid today. Communities have the right to intervene should a utility try this at any time. Right now, he's aware of at least 100 communities in Massachusetts that could be affected if such a change would happen, who would join in along with the MMA and the MAPC. Secondly, in terms of the financial perspective for the town, the potential savings from the project is at least $17,000 a year on a current cost. Anyway, the savings is about at least $17,000 a year. The current pole attachment fee for cable companies, that is, if a cable company wants to use the utility company's pole, that charge is $13.55 per year. We have 336 fixtures at least, so about that number of lights. The potential impact of the pole fee is about $4,700. So, in other words, our savings of over $17,000 could theoretically be subtracted by $4,700, still leaving us with $12,000, $13,000 savings per year. In addition, he also points out that the delay of this project could jeopardize our funding from MAPC, which comes from the State Energy Office, as there's some indication that they may not get additional funding. Hopefully that's not the case. But his view is that the risk is very low, of the risk of having pole attachment fees charged, and he thinks it makes no sense to give up the savings that increase every time energy rates go up. Even if the utility could get the DPU to approve pole attachment fees after 20 years, there's still significant savings. And he finishes with, while I appreciate the concern for this provision and would prefer we're not there, this is not an issue the utility will give in to, and our only recourse would be a filing with the DPU under the provisions of MGL 164.334A. Every month the project is delayed, the town is losing $1,400 in savings. My best advice is to move forward and pay attention to any rate filings in the future to be able to intervene should this issue be raised. So that's one direction. The other two are much quicker. Second one is I did contact Patrick Roach, who oversees the program of converting streetlights for the whole state on behalf of the State Energy Office at MAPC. He says, I don't know of any other town that has challenged this provision or taken issue with it. In terms of the big picture, all the streetlights in utility territories, and there's over 400,000 of them, we have 330, 70% of all of those in the state are either owned or about to be owned by the municipalities, and all those municipalities have this kind of provision in their agreements. And by the end of the program, the one that they're overseeing, 96% of those will be converted to LED. In number of municipalities, there's it's exactly even now, 152 own or about to own them, 152 don't. The others are municipal light plant towns. In any case, you can make a pretty good case that should the utility try to charge pole attachment fees, Medfield would be in league with a huge number of other municipalities to take the issue up. And lastly, we reached out to Penny Connor, who's a Medfield resident and a senior vice president at Eversource, and she said that neither she nor Steve Grattan, who is in charge of all their energy conservation work, they're not aware of Eversource ever charging, or in their memories at least, ever charging pole attachment fees, which tends to corroborate our consultant saying that it hasn't happened for 20 years.
Penny's also on our energy committee.
Correct.
And what is the pole attachment fee? How much would it be?
$13.55 is what George is saying.
Well, that's what, that's
per
what cable
pole or
companies
just
that charge, that's
pole?
predicated on cable companies. They're assuming that's what the charge would be, because that's what cable companies are charged to attach to the
Okay,
poles.
when cable companies charge it, what do they charge it for? For hooking their cables up to the pole?
Yes, being on the poles.
So just to remind us, ourselves, the transaction that we're doing here is purchasing the light fixtures, not the poles.
Right.
And the price, just to remind us, is $1.
Is this a reversible thing? If suddenly we decide we want to get out of the light attachment business, and we just say, we're getting rid of all our lights, Eversource, we want you to put lights up again, is that,
I bow to Mark's
No.
close reading.
so we would go dark? There would be either you put up your own
Oh,
lights
you put up
or-
a street light, and why part of what Fred's saying is not an issue in other municipalities. For instance, Franklin, they own most of their street poles too. They put a lot of their lights in subdivisions. We stopped doing that years ago, but a lot of their lights are in subdivisions, and it's just a light stanchion. So they bought all those from the utility in Franklin years ago.
So the fee then would be Eversource attempting, as the owner of the pole, to charge us for having the
rental
light
fee.
fixture that we own on their pole?
Right, it's a use fee.
Yes.
Okay, and so is that $13.55, is that what Eversource charges the cable company for putting their cable on the Eversource poles?
That's what George is saying it is now, yeah.
Okay, so that's what it would be. So it would be 330 times 1,300.
Right, that's why he's saying our savings then would be diminished by $4,700 a year. Our savings that we're currently
So
headed
it's
for at least $17.
$13.55 per pole, not $1,355 per
Sorry,
pole.
yes, correct, $13.
Okay, that's, I heard it as 1,355 per pole at first, okay. Well,
Glad you asked again,
13.55
yes.
is a little different, okay.
Yes.
The question I was getting at, what I was getting at is if this thing completely blew up and turned into a really bad idea 20 years from now. Right now, Eversource provides lights. Is there something that obliges them to do that, or is it just that they want to sell electricity, and in order to do that, they provide lights?
What's underpinning our current system, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It goes back.
And the question behind
That's a
that is,
great
because
hit.
if this turned out to be a really bad idea that we couldn't anticipate because the things that Eversource has reserved to itself would allow it to make it economically punitive when they don't get enough, they're not selling enough electricity, so we're gonna get the money from you a different way. What if we suddenly said, okay, we wanna get back out of the light attachment, the light business, and we want you to start giving us our lights again? Is there any obligation that they have to do that, or Is it not is it really not an option to unwind this? I understand it'd be expensive, or it would cost money, but
I'm not.
This is
not a lawyer.
largely regulated, the utilities are largely regulated at the state level through DTE or whatever they're calling themselves these days.
Okay.
And it's uniform throughout the state.
Mhm.
Frankly, I'm not sure whether the issue of attachment by others to their poles is something that's subject to a tariff under DTE's jurisdiction or not. There's continuing deregulation in the market, there's also flipping and consolidation, all that sort of thing. So you may or may not be dealing with Eversource down the road. My obligation is to point it out and the exposure, and it's your call. If you feel it's minimal or it's still a net savings and you decide to go in that direction, I've done my job.
Yeah, I mean, I think our insurance policy here on all of this is the number of towns that have done it, right? I mean, if it affects that many people, then, you know, that's usually when the state would decide to step in and save us from ourselves, certainly, as long as the right districts or legislative districts are affected by this issue, it would be resolved in a favorable way.
well, beyond that, the state is promoting energy conservation.
Correct.
So if suddenly a utility were to change the economics to where makes no sense, the state wouldn't allow that to happen
The
because
state,
you're.
understand that the utilities themselves, sooner or later, would be mandated to switch to the
LED.
LED lights.
Right.
So it's in their interest right now to get rid of that obligation by the town taking over the light fixtures, which is why they're only charging you nominal amount for them.
Do we have a sense of how soon that's likely to happen?
I don't know.
How soon
The
what?
state, what Mark said, if, at some point, the state is gonna mandate utilities convert to LED lighting. If that's a political decision that's coming within 5 years down the road,
Yeah, I
then
see.
it doesn't make any sense.
No, I don't know that that's in the offing. Although Mark's correct, it's logical. So I do know that, I work in this field, although I stayed recused from all the activities of the Energy Committee. But I do work in this field, so it's fascinating to me that over the 6 years that I've been involved, there've been a few towns that still have incandescent streetlights in some cases. And in those cases, in some of those cases, they weren't planning to do anything about it, but what do you know, they can't get those light bulbs anymore. That's an example of what you're talking about. So yes, over the next, who knows how many years, we don't know how many years, this may be become de facto mandated if high-pressure sodium lamps and or fixtures or ballasts are no longer available, for instance.
All right, I mean, I think we have to sort out the factual issue with respect to Verizon before we can do anything on this, so I think, we can put this off to our next, hopefully we can resolve that question
So
before.
there is a time constraint issue here, which is that the actual installation is supposed to happen by December 31, or we lose our state grant money. I gather that the MAPC says that there's a little small amount of flexibility in that, but not much, is the way the email read. So that I don't think that we have a lot of time to sit on this.
Do we have 2 weeks? Do we have 2 weeks?
The chair of the Energy Committee?
Just grab the microphone, please.
Who flew back for this meeting.
Well, not quite. I'm Leo Linsky. I am the chairman, and I do have to apologize because I did just arrive from overseas this morning. So from my time, I'm somewhere after 1 o'clock in the morning.
Then you don't need to
Yeah,
apologize.
the issue beyond Mark's concerns is that we're under a timeline. And even though the MAPC will grant us a small window, that's not necessarily a month or more. I would expect, maybe they'll give us 10 days, maybe 15 days. A small portion. At any rate, so that's what puts pressure on this. As my my initial advice to the committee and to the selectmen would be, let's wait until the decision-making powers from Eversource come back to their offices, and let's work it out in the fullness of time. But I'm not at all sure or feel confident that that we have the luxury of that kind of time, which is why we've coming before the board tonight. While we're not asking for a decision tonight, we are under a timeline.
Well, I mean, our next scheduled meeting is October 16th. If we had to meet before then, we could meet before then to do it. I mean, this was not on our agenda when originally posted, so we can't
Correct.
vote on the contract tonight anyway. And so, if you need an indication from us that, of what we think about this, I can't give you an indication because I don't have the answer to the Verizon question. Pete and Gus could weigh in on what they think about this, and then we can vote on it at a meeting. You know, I think if the time is that much of the essence, we'll do what we can to make it happen. I think in the future, if that's the case, you should give us a little more of a heads up.
Absolutely.
Rather than coming in at the last minute and say, you have to do this now. And so I think if it can wait till the 16th, we'll do it on the 16th. If it can't wait till the 16th, if you could find another day next week, I'm out of town next week, but these two guys might be able to get together to deal with this at that point, not to speak for both of
So
you.
maybe a
but-
couple things, Mike. I think that one of the data points that hasn't been shared, that Fred shared with us at the meeting on Thursday last week, was that the procurement of, once the town decides to actually go ahead and pulls the trigger on doing this, it's a time frame of 45 to 60 days, so we don't have a huge
Again,
window
if
of.
we posted a meeting tomorrow morning at 8 AM,
Yep.
you and
All right.
Gus can meet on Thursday morning at 8 AM. Like, we
Sure.
can't vote
All
on
right,
it
so that's
tonight.
just, that's
And so
one thing that,
give us a date by which you need a decision, and we'll schedule a meeting to vote on it. I mean, that's just, it can't just be not the fullness of time or not by, when is it? Do you need it by Friday? Can you guys meet on Friday? Are you available on Friday? I'm not, but you can get a quorum.
yep,
The,
I
Will
am.
you be available on Friday?
Yeah, but before I would even be sure, I don't like signing contracts with loose ends.
Right,
And
absolutely.
the idea that,
absolutely.
sign a contract with loose end because we don't have time,
I agree with you.
Right.
I don't, I mean, I
Right.
would need to get over that hump
I'm
first,
assuming
because
loose-
I don't
yeah.
understand why it would be that hard for Eversource to give us answers to some pretty straightforward questions.
I mean, I'm assuming we tie up the loose ends before we vote on it. I'm just
Yeah,
saying, if
yeah.
we have a timing issue, we need a 48-hour window before we can post the meeting. If you didn't make the 48-hour window for this meeting for the vote on that contract, if it really is that much of an emergency that we gotta do it this week, we'll try to do it this week, assuming the questions are resolved.
But if
Right,
it's,
the-
and
well,
if
the
it's
problem-
45 to 60 days to process the procurement, that says we need to have this done by the end of October, not by the end of this week.
Correct, yeah. And I don't know what the time frame is for these Eversource guys to get back, and how soon they would move once they are back. I'm sure they have probably 2 or 3 notes on their desk of some consequence they need to pay attention to. So I think the reason that we bring this to the board tonight is we're feeling this pressure. We understand we're not asking for a vote tonight. We're not asking for a vote on Friday, because I don't think that can happen. My concern is the earliest time that Mark can get back in touch with these Eversource guys, and that we can work out the details of the language of the contract.
I'm thinking from his email, I'm interpreting it to be next week.
Well, yeah, whatever, but we need to move forward with all due haste as much as practical.
So I've just 2 things, if I may. Mark, we're in touch with Penny Connor. Do we want to let her know who you're dealing with there so they can close that loop on their end?
I'm dealing with the general legal counsel.
But it sounds like we have 2 issues, right? There's 2 issues. There's the Verizon issue, and then there's the pole attachment fee issue, right? the Verizon issue is a factual question we need an answer to.
She could answer that.
The pole attachment question, I think, is likely to be, based on all the information we have, just a risk-reward policy judgment for the Board of Selectmen to make. I mean, I don't think we necessarily need any more information on that. It's either we can fight this in this contract now, which would drag it well beyond the timeframe here.
Correct.
Or just roll the dice and see what happens with that. But it seems to me the Verizon question, you may not need the in-house lawyer to answer that question. I mean, presumably, that is a piece of information that is known to more than one person at Eversource who can access it. So, I mean, it may well be you could tie up the loose ends in a shorter period of time, but it sounds like that's what we need to do, is to tie up these loose
Yes.
ends.
Send her a
And then
copy
you
of
give
my
us
email
48
if you
hours
want.
notice, and if it has to happen before October 16th, somehow we can have a special meeting to do this.
Right.
It
There
doesn't
there
sound
is,
to me like-
yeah,
if-
there is,
If we
there
need to
is,
expedite something, it's probably after the October 16th meeting. If we can't vote on it on October 16th, then there maybe is an issue.
okay.
But,
Yeah,
I
there,
think
there
that's what
there
we're
is
hearing.
one other item that the board needs to be, I think, needs to be aware of, and that is that Medfield is not operating by itself in this, is that we are, MAPC has selected a contractor to actually do the installations, do the upgrades. And we are one of 5 towns. And in buying the materials, what do they call, Fred, the heads?
Fixtures, yeah.
Yeah, that they're probably looking at scale for purchasing. So if they have to buy 330 heads, fixtures for Medfield, or whether they're buying 3,000, the price comes down. So that's the other pressure point here, is that because of this 40 to 60 days lead time that they want, we don't want to be behind the 8 ball.
But it sounds like, I don't think, Gus or Pete, do either of you want to delay this for reasons other than waiting for the information about the contract? So it sounds like the only
Right.
thing that's delaying us here is the lack of, I think we've,
Is the
I
contract.
understand the sense of urgency and the timing that we need to act. It sounds like maybe we could do it on the 16th?
With any luck, yes.
Okay, what I'm saying is, if we were to act on this contract on the 16th, would that work in terms of all the time pressure points you've identified?
Okay.
Yes or no? Maybe.
I can't answer that because I don't know how long it's going to take Mark to work out.
No, one way or the
That's a
other,
separate
one way or
question.
the other, on the
Separate question.
16th, they would make a decision.
Right, in other words,
Okay.
That's a
we
drop
can't
dead date.
control Eversource getting back to us. The only thing we control is the timing of our meetings.
Then let's put it on the calendar for the
And
16th.
we'll do our best, and really, it sounds, most likely, the only thing we really need from Eversource is the information on Verizon, because it sounds like,
And you may
based on
never
everything
get
we've
that
heard,
information separately.
they're not gonna change their view
You
on.
may be able to get that.
I'll try to get that information,
Yeah, get that
a different
information, and we
direction
can put it
than-
on for the 16th,
Very
and
good,
that should work timing-wise.
Yep.
very good.
And
Thank
Mr.
you,
Chairman,
folks.
just as
Cynthia
a,
had one other item for the, from the Energy Committee.
Sure, Cynthia Green, I'm on the Energy Committee. One announcement, one question. The announcement is that there's a national solar tour that's going to be happening this Saturday, and the above-mentioned Penny Connor has an open house to show her solar array. It's on 3 Donley Drive on Saturday from 2 to 4, and she asked us to announce that here. The other is that we worked with Jerry McCarty, the facilities director, and he was extremely helpful for all the projects we were doing under Green Communities. And we're wondering what the process is for hiring a new facilities director and who we should go to in the interim so that we can keep these projects moving.
So I think the answer to the hiring schedule is, we have been trying to hire someone for
Okay.
several months. We offered the job to someone who turned it down. And so we are still searching for someone else. So if you know anyone who might be interested, please have them apply. I think in the interim, I would probably start with Christine Treweiler.
Okay.
And then she may refer you to somebody else, but I think that's where I would start. But yeah, we are trying to hire someone, and we have
Great.
so far been unsuccessful.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Mr. Chair, just as a point of information, the Energy Committee's request to be on the agenda was submitted on Friday morning,
Ah, okay.
so it was timely.
Oh, what, did it get on there? Or
No.
was it posted? Okay. So then I apologize for suggesting you didn't meet the deadline. So, but in any event, it wasn't on there, so we can't do it. Anyway, and we couldn't do it anyway because there's open questions about it. All right, it looks like there are library trustees here, and so that's the next largest group of people who are here. So we'll take the library trustees next under action items. I know we have a letter from the library trustees. You had a resignation of a member, and you are requesting to leave the seat vacant until the next town election when it would be filled in the ordinary course. Do you have a microphone over there?
Just happened to happen.
Okay.
Yes.
And the term ends in March anyway,
Correct.
and you have 4 members,
5.
5.
We
Once
would
there
have
be a
5
vacancy, you'll have
remaining.
4 left.
No, we have 6, and there would
Oh,
be,
6 and 5 remaining.
correct.
Oh, okay. Any questions or comments on this request?
No?
I have no issue with it. Do we need a formal motion? No. So I think you're good to go. Keep
All
the
right.
seat empty.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, it
But
looks
it's
like,
still, you're still, for voting purposes and quorums and all that, you base it on your authorized membership, the
basically,
6.
you need 4 for a quorum.
Right.
4 for a quorum. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Hospital RFI, there's at least 2 here, so you're next. Discuss state hospital RFI. Ken or John? Yeah. Ken, go right ahead. As long as you have a microphone, you can do it from wherever you want.
I'm Ken Richard. I'm one of the 5 members from the newly constructed Medfield State Hospital Development Committee. We're here to just inform the Board of Selectmen that excuse me, the first charge that we were asked to undertake was the creation of a request for information, and to have that request for information approved by the Board of Selectmen to make sure it's complete and covering the topical areas that you would like to see. The committee met on a couple of occasions. Town planner Sarah Raposa actually kicked it off with a form RFI that she had been able to essentially abstract from previous RFIs done by towns in similar fashion. So most of our job was fairly straightforward. We've submitted through the town planner as of yesterday the consolidated commentary of the existing committee, hoping that if the selectmen are okay with that RFI document, we would turn it over to Sarah to get it disseminated. If there are comments or questions, I think we're actually running a little bit ahead of schedule that was given to us to get this process going, so we have a little bit of time, and certainly would look forward to having any questions or comments raised. The only other key issue would be the question of, who should the RFI go to? It could be off by 1 or 2, but given that the majority of the members of the committee are active in the real estate development business and fairly familiar with the industry and with some input from citizenry, I think we're at 73 or 75 different potential developers that we would propose to send this to. The only other caveat that we had as a group was to say, more the merrier. I mean, as you know, the objective of the RFI is to get input from the commercial development world as they take a look at our master plan and to provide us with concerns, questions, or comments that may challenge or support, the viability of what we ultimately do there, albeit in concert with the master plan that was recently issued. So the expectation is we could get that out as soon as it's ready, and then off the top of my head, I don't know the scheduled due date for responses, but that would be clearly, pardon me?
November 16th.
Right, so that would be clearly indicated on that, and we would hope that the town planner would disseminate and get those RFIs out, certainly potentially follow up the mailing with some follow-up in terms of trying to drive back to us as many responses as possible. And that's really the update as it stands right now.
So A couple logistics things. Sarah had sent an email when she distributed the RP saying she was going to ask you to make copies to go into Pete and Mike's packages. Did that happen? Okay.
No, didn't get that request.
Okay.
Because I don't think I've seen it. Have you seen it?
No.
So, see, which was, well, was really good because I was right on the verge of printing out this 69-page document 3 times, and I only did my own. So it's a thick document. There's some of it's background, but this is the physical RFI. If one of you wants this one, I'll print another one out, but I only brought one because I thought you were going to get one separately. Would you like, I also made copies of the list of targets, and that I do have copies of, so if you want me to, I'll pass.
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
sure.
So this is I actually think it was 39 that were on the Excel spreadsheet, because I think it went down to line 40. There was a header, but there's 39, I think, at least here, unless there's even more, 39 target recipients for and this was with the committee kind of doing a bit of a screen in terms of who they thought was in the right kind of space to be a candidate for, historic renovation, low-income housing type stuff. So that's at least the current
But-
target list.
If you haven't done so, I would suggest touching base with Christine or John Thompson and get the names of the developers who have had inquiries about the property. if you
Actually,
haven't.
we did.
Good.
Back when the Medfield State Hospital the Master Planning Committee, they kept very copious notes, Mike, of any interaction that was held with people from the building and development community that expressed an interest. So we went back through those minutes and we did the best we could to get them on that list.
Okay.
To maintain
I would check with
continuity.
Christine too, because I think there are some
Perfect,
who contacted who didn't go through the master planning committee
perfect.
as well.
That'd be
So,
great.
Yeah, and I can give you some names of people who I've spoken to who have talked to me about it as well.
Well, then, as we said earlier, more the merrier.
Yeah, okay.
So the mechanics here, the target date that the committee came back to the Board of Selectmen with was that the RFI would be issued on this Friday, the 5th of November. At our last meeting, we discussed the fact that, particularly the two of you, because I'm on the committee, so I've had my fingers in this pie already, but that the two of you would review this and approve it, with the thought that if we could get it to you by the 2nd of November, even if it wasn't the absolute final version, I think originally we were thinking you would approve it at this meeting unless there was something radically wrong, recognizing it's a 60-some page document that you just got handed and Pete hasn't even seen it. That may not be reasonable to expect you to do that. But if
Well, I
you
mean,
don't.
I'm
the
assuming
reason
that
for-
most of this stuff is regurgitation of stuff that's already available.
Much of the bulk comes right out of the master
Yeah,
plan.
the first 4 or 5 pages are the.
Yeah.
So the question I have in my mind is, should we proceed with the 5th of November as the distribution date? Because you two are comfortable enough that this is approvable. If you have a few minor edits, we could certainly do another iteration by Friday. Or should we stretch this out 1 or 2 weeks? If we did that, then we had a 6-week response time. So the 16th of November was keyed off the 5th of October distributing the RFIs. To the extent we push this out a little bit, we probably could push it out, given that we I think had the 18th of December as the target date for incorporating all changes. So if the RFI responses are the 16th of November, and we have to digest and incorporate whatever we're going to digest and incorporate by the 18th, we actually have probably the better part of the month of December to do that if we need to. So you kind of need to.
Gus, what are the different dates that you're talking about? Did you just say it's due back December 16 or?
November 16th.
November
Well,
16th.
You used a
You're saying
couple of different
October
dates on
or
issuance. You
So
said
he-
November, when I think you meant
I'm sorry, I meant
October.
October. So the issuance date that was targeted is this coming Friday, the 5th of October.
Okay.
The response period we settled on was 6 weeks, which means the response is due back in by the November 16th. And I am taking this third off the top of my head. I believe that the target date to finish incorporating changes into the master plan that reflect the inputs from the RFI responses was the 18th of December. So that would be the master plan that the public would be introduced to understand as they consider whether or not to approve the zoning changes in the spring town meeting.
Okay, thanks.
So, I mean, I just flipped through those questions while we were talking. It seems like a reasonable set of questions to me. I mean, I think it probably, you know, I might have sort of a catch-all type question. Any other thoughts on the questions? I think most of the questions are geared toward, as I think the direction was, geared towards comments in the master plan itself, as opposed to, would you do something completely different, right? I think that's kind of the thrust of what we're trying to get from that. So, I don't know, Pete, if you want to, I certainly don't want to delay it at all. And so, and I'm not going to wordsmith the questions. You all know more about real estate than I do. And so, if you're comfortable with the questions, I didn't see any glaring omissions. It seems like we'll get back from that. And I'll just give you some additional names of folks from my standpoint. Pete, if you want to read through those.
For the sake of time, Mike, if you want to just provide those directly to Sarah.
Okay, that's fine. Anything else from?
No, the only other thing I might mention with regard to this phase of the process is that I think expectations should be aligned with the fact that being a non-binding, document, I think the level of participation, the quality of the input, the thoughtfulness of the responses might be a little underwhelming, given that most firms are very busy, have limited staff, and my expectation, frankly, would be there might be a lot of, let's call them self-serving kind of commentary, so that they too can be in the rotation when we finally get around to doing something binding. So I don't expect them to be terrifically probative in terms of whatever, but hopefully we'll be able to garner at least some additional interest from qualified firms as we move forward in the process.
At least for myself, I can say that my expectations are significantly tempered and have been from the outset, and so. Are your expectations now tempered as well?
Well, to me, the linkage, I understand the point. In fact, the one piece of feedback I've gotten from somebody who reviewed the earlier one was, this is awfully long for an RFI, and that may influence who responds. The problem is, if it's tempered here, but we have flaws in our master plan, our responses won't be any good. And so that's the real dilemma. If we don't get the commercial developers' inputs on this to make sure this master plan represents a serious opportunity for developers, we can then send out an RFP, we can have the zoning in place, and what we'll get is garbage for our proposals, in which case then we'll be looking at each other next summer saying, I wonder what we got to do to change the master plan or to change our plans. And we'll have lost yet another 9 months. So that's the issue that I have, is if we don't hear the voice of the market on this, I'm not confident we'll get good responses in an RFP.
So one of the things that I've always found very useful is to talk to somebody who's very experienced and get their gut reaction to scenarios. And the person that I know that knows a lot about real estate is Frank Perry, and I've always been impressed when I talk to Frank, because he just thinks about real estate in ways that don't occur to me, because I don't know as much about it as he does. And when I asked Frank about what we should be, or if he was interested in getting involved in this, he said he didn't have the time, but that he made the offer to talk to your committee and to bring along Jim Alcock, who runs Collier's, if that would be useful. Jim Alcock was the guy that sold the Montrose School site, and he lives in Westwood, so he's very familiar with, so if you guys want to meet with those two people, they're happy to meet with your committee and share.
Okay, thank you. And Pete, why don't, if you have a chance to look at that. Right?
Oh, yeah, I just looked at those, and I'm fine with those.
Okay, so we can't take a formal vote on it at all, but I think I'm comfortable with the development committee issuing it. Pete, are you as well? And
Yep.
see what happens, so thank you, and thank you for doing this. All right, Christian, I think you are next on the quorum list here. I assume you're here about the grant agreement for the DCR Recreation Trails Program?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, that's why I'm here. I was hoping I wouldn't have to say much because the grant agreement, I mean, Sarah Raposa prepared the documents for you, and I'm here to answer questions if there are any. But the document that DCR sent us is to enter a grant agreement with the Department for Conservation and Recreation that will give the town the option to get reimbursed for up to $100,000 for construction costs and possibly some soft costs, such as the liability insurance, the environmental liability insurance, for the rail trail. And so,
And this
so
is
we were
really the
hoping that you would be,
standard
sorry?
This is sort of the standard kind of state contract.
Yeah.
It is, yes, it is a standard contract, and there are no commitments involved by signing it. If we never get to actually starting construction, then you will not file for a reimbursement with the DCR, and the grant will lapse after, or will just go away after 2 years. So we have 2 years after signing, or actually, we have until December 31st, 2020 to use the money. And if at that point we haven't done enough to spend it, we won't get any more. That's basically what we are agreeing to, right?
And Mark, you've reviewed it as well?
Not all of it. I've talked to Sarah about it. As you indicated, some of these are state contracts.
It's
and
all the
that's-
standard state T&Cs.
Right,
and
that's,
stuff.
that's non-negotiable. It's like take it or leave it, so.
And all the stuff in this part of the contract is just sort of, here's what we're giving you, in the terms of what we're giving you. I mean, I looked through it, I thought it looked fine to me, I didn't have any, it seemed pretty straightforward. Peter, Gus, any questions?
The only, I think it's straightforward. The only thing I noted was that this grant is, I think, in all cases, when the state gives a grant, they basically say, well, the grant is subject to our having availability funds. So if you undertake something, if, the state suddenly reneged, we'd probably be holding the bag, but I don't see that as any bigger risk than we take on any other grant that we
Anything
accept
else from
from
the state, right?
So far, they haven't done that, so.
Right,
I-
you don't get the money till you actually have the money.
Yeah, but I think there's broad support for this. The issues that were in place before have been addressed. The email that Sarah sent basically said we can accept the grant before we've actually signed the liability, gotten the insurance and all that other stuff.
Right, so that was the one open question, if signing a lease is a prerequisite for the grant agreement, and it is not. So we can,
Right.
you can sign the grant agreement without showing a lease, but we need to, at some point, before we start withdrawing the funds, we need to show the signed lease agreement with the MBTA.
And so as I was playing with that, I say, so does that somehow put us on a track to have to sign a lease agreement? The answer is no, because if you don't have a lease agreement, you don't do the construction, you don't take the grant. So it's not like we're making any decision here on one thing
Correct.
that has a knockoff effect on something else, so seems all right to me.
All right, do we have a motion?
Question?
Oh.
Is there a match?
Microphone?
Is there a town match?
Yes,
I'm just curious if there's a town match, and if the project doesn't come through, is the grant, is the town on the hook for anything?
there is a 20% match requirement, and we have already raised that. So, I mean, money will come from a combination of the Medfield Foundation and the Bay Colony Rail Trail Association to the town that will, satisfy the match requirement. So it's $20,000, and it can be in kind. And we met with Mo Goulet on Friday, Michael and I, and we talked a little bit about possible contributions from the DPW. And one thing that we talked about was reclaimed asphalt that is available to, if there's any excess material, then he would be willing to contribute that, and also time reviewing contracts and supporting the the request for bids that needs to go out before we can actually engage with the contractor. So all this would count towards that match requirement at prevailing wages.
I think that one of the things that we might want to consider is whether or not this is a sufficient interest to the town to get this accomplished, that we might ask the DPW to partake in some of the work on it to
I think
to
that's-
make
I
it
think they've
accomplished.
offered- Yeah,
Yes, is the short answer. So Mo didn't volunteer more than that, basically. And so if we want to, one thing that we discussed, for instance, was brush clearing, and there's a lot of vegetation that needs to be cleared and removed, hauled out before construction can start. So he said, well, we don't have a tree crew, we don't have equipment, I don't have the staff, we can't help with that. That's, that I leave it at that. So if there is any way for the Board of Selectmen to provide a motivational, how should I say that, an incentive to go a little bit further than that, it would be great, of course. But we're not counting on that at this point.
So Pete, the only reaction I have to your suggestion, because I'm assuming that it's not that Mo is just kicking back on Friday afternoons.
No, of course.
If the selectmen decide that the rail trail is more important than the sidewalks we're pushing the highway department to do, or the highway, the road assessments that we're pushing them to do, or the planning for North Street, if Mo says, yeah, I got the excess capacity, it's not a problem, that's one thing. But if in fact we're just throwing another thing at them, it ought to be a thing that we really think is more important than some of the other things we've had.
Yeah,
I'm
and we don't know that level of
We're not.
their busyness,
we're not
and so.
crossing that bridge yet anyway.
Yeah, I think we'll have to see what the plan is, what the steps are, when it's happening. I think that's a discussion to have when there's a plan on what we're gonna do, and he can have them look at it and say, okay, Mo, as part of this plan, what can you guys do as a piece of this on a reasonable schedule that we're planning? And, because he doesn't know what's gonna be happening. I mean, when do you think you'll be actually starting work on this if everything works out?
We hope the second half of 2019.
Okay, so he has no idea how busy he's gonna be in the second half of 2019, and so I think this is something to revisit once we have more concrete plans and we can figure out what it is, but, do we have a motion on this contract?
I move that we approve or sign the contract for the DCR grant for the rail trail.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
All right.
As I understand it, this initially will be a gravel,
Stone dust. Yes.
stone dust, and then in a year or two, the town will be asked to pave it? Yes.
Well, not
As soon as you get joggers and bicyclists up there, you will be asked to pave it. I would assume that that is additional expense.
Well, in the meantime, nobody goes in to do anything until you get a signed lease with the MBTA, so.
And has there been,
Actually, I'm not sure that this is really what we should expect to happen, because I think the character of the trail as a whole is not, it's different than, say, the Medfield Rail Trail, which is a very nice paved bike path. But the Medfield version, first of all, we will not connect to Dover initially, as you may be aware. We're still having conversation with the Dover folks. And Dover is very close to signing a lease with the MBTA at this point, by the way. But they may not include that last stretch between Hunt Drive and the town line in that initial version. And the Friends of the Dover Rail Trail very much want it to be finished and connecting, but politically they think that it may be wiser to not do that, at least in that first iteration. So.
And Mike, the Newton and the Needham iterations of this same rail trail, they're still stone dust, and they've been built for several years now.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, within 2 to 3 years, you'll be asked to pave it.
It's a very nice surface, the stone dust surface. You can bike on it just fine.
And there will be horses. I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about with the Hunt Club is possibly connecting the hunting grounds to the hospital grounds through going down to Harding Street and crossing there, and then going behind the Kingsbury Club and McCarthy Field up to the hospital. That would be an option that they have that is not available today.
Yeah,
and,
they go on streets now.
But
They have to hack down School and Dwight
Yeah.
Street. I know you can hear me, Ben. And so just an alternative way of getting to the hospital on the Thanksgiving hunt, as well as a number of other hunts throughout the year.
Now,
Heard that one
now,
again.
do I understand that Dover will not allow the trail from Medfield into Dover, but if Dover people want to use the trail, since they have a lease, they will be able to go to the Medfield line, so Dover people can use our trail, but we can't use their trail? Is that correct?
No. No, that's,
Just not making it easy.
thank you. That's not correct. There is actually a side trail today that runs from Farm Street to Hunt Drive. It's often flooded and not easily passable during the wet season, but there are other alternatives. You can get off the corridor and you can continue on, get out on Hunt Drive, and continue there on the rail trail.
But my basic question is, Dover people can use the trail to get to Medfield, but once Medfield people get to Dover, they are not allowed on the Dover trail.
How would they enforce that?
Well, that's how I understand it. They're going to have a lease with the MBTA on the rail trail through Dover, but they are not going to connect the trail beyond Hunt Drive.
Dover people don't like
they
to
will.
come to Medfield. It's only Medfield people who are struggling to get to Dover.
Some of them, not all of them. Actually, we've got more people from Medfield from Dover moving to Medfield these days.
And we'll have a constituency who will take care of that issue for you.
Yes.
But I mean, as
just
I
think
understand
people
it,
ought to be aware.
Dover's not going to put in a new service on that last 200 feet. So presumably that will still be owned by the MBTA? Or will they just lease it and not build the
That's
road?
my understanding at this point. One of the reasons why this took so long was the negotiation about the lease with the MBTA, and the two main issues were going 60 years instead of 99 years, or a shorter period, shorter duration. And the other issue was not getting the entire corridor. And so my understanding is, based on recent conversations with somebody from the Dover Greenway Friends, that the MBTA has agreed to those changes, and they will only lease the section from Hunt Drive to Springdale Ave in the center of town. And so they will not finish that last stretch, which is more than 200 feet, but it's maybe 200, 300 yards.
But is the MBTA kick people off it now? The MBTA owns it now, right?
Hold on, let me provide some insight. So just basically, people don't really walk on the rail trail today. There are side trails that go all along. They're about 10 or 20 feet from the trail. So if they don't pave to the edge of Medfield, you'll still be able to go on the Dover Trail and vice versa, because there'll only be a 200-foot section where you go down a little dirt path where all the Norfolk Hunt Club horses go, and you get back on the trail. I mean, there's no one saying that Dover would never say, Medfield residents, you can't go on Dover land, and vice versa. It'd be silly. It would never happen.
Is that Dover Trail on public property or private property?
It's on the corridor. It's on the same corridor. It's fairly wide. It's about 80 feet wide.
It depends,
Public
Mike.
property or
It
private
depends.
property? Because if it's private property, the owners can deny access.
AT&T, some is on AT&T land, right?
You'd have to go out and measure it.
I just think we need to be sure of all these things, because I think if, in fact, Dover people can come to Medfield using their that from Hunt Drive to our trail and then come and use Medfield's, but Medfield people cannot use that 200-foot stretch from the Medfield line to Hunt Drive.
Mike, I don't think that's going to happen. There are trails now that I run on, you go down the Sherburne side of the river, and the signage says, private property, you're welcome to use this. The trustee's property has ended, but you're welcome to, please stay on the trail. The same on the Dover side coming back. The trails go behind people's houses, and they welcome the people to use it. I don't think you're worrying about stuff that's not a problem.
Okay. Any owner, if a new owner buys that property, they can shut the public out? There's nothing.
Well,
But it would be shut out to both Dover and Medfield residents. It's not that.
Not necessarily.
Except for that one resident.
Okay.
All right, well, we have signed the contract. All right, is anyone else here on a particular agenda item? Special town meeting? Okay, Gene. We'll go to the special town meeting articles.
You've got the capital grant as well, right? This capital grant agreement? Capital grant agreement for feasibility funding?
We've already matched it. I think it's just a matter of getting money.
You need it signed, well, I think it's one of the, I thought it's on the signature list, I think.
I think that's the money would actually come in.
Well, it is, but before we sign it, there's questions.
Do you want to start with that, Gus, then?
I would suggest, well, it doesn't really matter.
No, let's start, I mean, I'm sensitive to the length of our agenda and the time of the
Right.
people here who are for one item on it, so if this is the Jean Minio portion of the meeting, this will be the Jean Minio portion of the meeting, if we can get her a microphone. Right.
Next time I schedule anything before the selectmen, I'm going to bring 6 people with me, so I get to go first.
Democracy in action.
Adopting Ken Richards so we can be a block, just
Ah.
so you know.
Oh, we had so much stuff this
All
week.
lined up right. Now we're pulling it from random spots.
Here we go. Gus, you want to start with
You
your
want me to
questions?
start? Yeah, and Gene, I'm actually glad you're here. So this is from Lillian Munoz from Mass Development to Sarah. Attached, please find a copy of the CFF Capital Grant Agreement for the town of Medfield for your review and Michael's signature. After the grant agreement has been signed, please email a copy of the signature page. So that's what we're talking about here. The reason I'm glad you're here, and it actually applies to both articles. The first, I've been certainly an active supporter of these Arts and Culture Center, so this is not, anything I'm doing here has nothing to do with that. The Kathy McCabe, my commitment to it actually increased 8 months ago, and Kathy McCabe brought up the idea that I had thought of the Arts and Culture Center as the thing that we might do at the end of the process, once everything was up, and then maybe we could raise money and we could do something. Instead, Kathy raised the idea that the Arts and Culture Center could become the anchor that would increase the value of all the other property on the State Hospital campus. So rather than having it be the last thing we got done when we finally had enough time to run bake sales and car washes to raise money, it suddenly became the thing that we might want to do up front. And fundamentally, I am still heading down that way in my own thinking. The one issue that has cropped up is there has been a counter message from, I don't know a thing about real estate development at the scale that we're doing at the State Hospital. So I'm listening to Kathy McCabe's advice about the significance of this, and I'm taking that as the advice of someone with experience. There are other real estate developers, including some of the members of the Development Committee, who are saying, absolutely not. If you do that, you're taking the thing that a developer would look at as this kind of integral part of their development, and you're pre-reserving it for an arts and culture center, and that will detract from the value. I have no idea which of those pieces of advice is correct. I am sure that we want to keep this process going down the road. But every time you've asked, we've always said, well, is this a fork in the road where we have to commit to doing one thing or another? And so far, we've said, no, it's not. So this will be important both for this grant, but it'll also be important that the three of us have an understanding of the special town meeting article, of what we are and aren't doing with that article. And I'm glad you're here to hear this, because it's not that I'm against this, it's that I'm the person who's hearing conflicting advice from experts in the real estate world. And I am hoping we'll get some feedback from the RFI, because what I'm actually hoping happens here is before we'd ever get to the point where we would actually make a decision and do something with this property, we'll be past the RFI process. We will know what should or shouldn't go in the RFP, and then we'll know which way to go on this. So that's just the backdrop for both of these things related to the Arts and Culture Center. A lot of the wording that you've used, quite understandably, is talking about what you're doing and is very specific about its purposes. You should know in the RFI, we softened that. We actually didn't refer to the chapel. We simply said that the town wants an arts and culture center. It didn't say where it was, only, not because we were not wanting to go to the chapel, but because we didn't want to automatically preclude developers from coming in and saying, should go over there. I think in the conversations I've had, the one piece that's solid across the board is no one is saying, let's not have an arts and culture center. It's all about, is the chapel and the infirmary the right place? And I'm sympathetic to where Gene's coming from, but I'm respectful of people who seem to have expertise in this area who are saying that's the wrong thing to do. And so I don't want to stop the train. I want to keep things moving, but I just want to be sure we all understand what that means. So with that, I had a few questions on this particular grant. It says it's a feasibility study, or at least it sounds like it's partially feasibility. My question is, what are the feasibility questions that this study will answer? Is it the technical feasibility, the site feasibility of the particular building? Is it the market feasibility? Is it the site feasibility in the context of the campus?
Now, this was a grant specifically for schematics.
Okay.
And this was an application that went in last December. We got word on it before town meeting. The town partially matched that grant, and we got a formal notification in June, but the grant is specifically for schematics.
So this will be, so it's the feasibility of the building.
Yeah, well, feasibility is one of their categories. That's how they classify.
Okay.
You can go in for capital, or you can go in for technical assistance and feasibility. So it's under, that's
Okay.
the category that,
Category, but this
how
is
they
actually
define
not
it.
a feasibility study. This is just taking what the building design would look like, the next step.
correct.
Then I have a question on page 3. And the only question I have on, and this has got to do with us operating in good faith. That's all this is. Under Section 7, representations and warranties, the grantee makes the following representations and warranties. The grantee is operating or planning to operate a cultural facility, and all statements or information provided in grantee's application for a grant from the fund were and continue to be accurate in all material respects. My only concern about that, obviously, the discussion and the focus of this grant is going to be on what we should do with the chapel and the infirmary to put an arts and culture center there. I just want to be sure that we are not making a representation as a town that we have decided that's what we're doing and that's what we're going to do. That's why I'm grasping on the feasibility part here, saying, well, it's good faith, we are moving in this direction. I think it's a wonderful plan. I think the analysis is there. There's this one other voice that I am not technically competent to discount that it's got me wants me to make sure we are not over-representing something to the state that we shouldn't be. That's it. So I think we're okay.
Yeah, I would agree.
I want you to hear, but I wanted you two to hear that, and it's
I,
not,
I have the same concerns, guys, that I'm not sure that it's the right place, or whether a developer will disagree and say that if we have committed to those two buildings, that it would perhaps reduce what they would pay the town or something, or it interferes. So I'm looking for some answers from the RFI about that, hopefully.
But at this point, A, I don't want to stop the momentum. B, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the dogged determination that you've had over the past several years. I know Jerry's helping as well, but part of me says, listen, anytime you have somebody in town that's willing to dig in this deep and try this hard to get something done, you need to have an awfully big obstacle to stop it, where the default is always, let's take a few more years to think about it before we do anything. So my philosophical leaning is to support you in this. I just had that one nagging concern because of the feedback, and I wanted that all on it. I wanted you to hear it. I wanted us to hear it. We are not yet at the point where we're making a non-reversible, taking a fork in the road decision.
And I think as to that representation, because, I mean, in our application, we were clear about what this is, right? I mean, they know when we say we're planning to operate a cultural facility, we're not telling them that we have one that's built and we are
Right.
planning to operate
Right.
one
Right.
if we can, right? And
Right.
so you're doing a feasibility study to find out if we can. I mean, I think I agree with both of you to an extent with respect to where we are. I think because I'm much more skeptical than both of you of the overall master plan, I don't think, even if a lot of developers thought this was a problem for them, I don't think we're causing a big problem by moving any further down this road. Just because I don't think any developers are really going to have a great interest in the master plan that's written, no matter what is done with the Lee Chapel. And I think what the best result here, and the likely result here after all of this, is going to be a more modest, phased approach that focuses on the part of the campus that leads up to the cultural facility. And so when I look at the overall cost and the overall expense and the big holes that are in the master plan, the financing holes that are in it as written, I see the cultural facility, apart from the value that it has on its own, as one of the ways that you fill some of those holes, that you have economic difficulties with the overall structure of the master plan. If we are successful in raising the money to do this, I think it has a value to the town, even if we're not able to redevelop the whole property. And so I think this is another way to attract investment in the site, and investment in the site that is currently now, if you look on the town's balance sheet, it's currently a liability and not an asset overall. And this is a way of taking a piece of that and moving it more in the direction of becoming an asset and less of a liability. And so if the Lee Chapel were on the back of the site, I'd be much more skeptical about going ahead with this, because I don't know, and I haven't seen, and I'm sure, look, we have how many developers on the list? You can probably talk to 60 different developers and get 47 different opinions on different pieces of it. Different people are going to have different points of view. The only opinions ultimately that are going to matter is going to be a developer coming with an actual proposal that's backed by actual financing and actual work. And so until then, it's interesting information, but it's not something that we have to, I think, deviate from our course on in response to those kinds of free advice, let's say. In response to free advice, I don't think we need to deviate from this. I think that moving this forward, again, recognizing that the result may be it can't happen, or we can't raise the money, or what have you, and it just doesn't work out. I agree that we should keep the momentum going forward. And I also agree that, look, if some developer comes and says, look, I'll give you $100 million for the hospital property if I can get the Lee Chapel, but only $10 if I don't get the Lee Chapel, then, maybe we'll find another place for the cultural facility. I wouldn't bet highly on that being the end game of all of this. And so I think with that said, and I think our representation here is accurate, we are planning to operate one if we can. And this feasibility study is to try to figure out if we can actually do it, right? And I guess we're.
So for three slightly different reasons, we're
Yeah.
all in agreement that we
Right.
should move ahead with this.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So to
I think we
sort
are.
of expand on your analysis, Mike, of the cultural facility, taking a couple buildings off of the problem list for the development and saving some money on the development because it's being paid for in another way. That gets me thinking about giving more buildings to Jean.
Oh, she has a second and third phase. Don't encourage her at this stage.
I have to tell you that when I saw that it was just the two buildings on the special town meeting, I thought to myself, oh darn.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I think to that, and they're aware of the status of this, right? So they're not thinking that we are building something.
If I were to jump to the article in the special town meeting, the reason they're connected is because the taxpayers will hear the approval at the special town meeting authorizing the selectmen to provide, to dispose of that property for the Arts and Culture Center. I suspect a majority of taxpayers will hear that as a decision that the selectmen are about to do that. And when we get there, I'm in favor of the article empowering us to do that, but I want to make sure that expectations are not that, and that means we've decided and that's where we're going. I want that set up to where we can, and it's mostly the three of us that we have a mind meld around that, so that if we get to next spring and people are saying, well, where's the Arts and Culture Center? We at least understood that was not what passing that article meant, was that we were immediately going to go about disposing of the property. Want a motion?
Yeah, Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
I haven't been involved with the grant application, so, no.
Okay.
Okay. So I move that we sign the CFF Capital Grant Agreement for the from the Cultural Facilities Fund for the funding of the next step in the Arts and Culture Center design.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. All right, special town meeting articles. Why don't we start with Gene's article?
Yep. I lined these all up.
Colleen, unless you have an article you want to talk.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Hold on. Go ahead, start.
So it's, I mean, the article, do you have a copy as it's written now, Gene?
Yep.
See if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to lease a portion of the town-owned land. Right. Article 4. And Mark, have you been involved in this
I
process?
drafted that
Yeah,
with Gene,
okay.
covered all the bases.
So I'm good with it.
Yeah, I think that article is written as fine. All right. Do we want to run through the articles now and, or on our position on the articles, or do we want to do that next time?
Yeah, I'm prepared to do it now, but, because that's what I thought we were gonna do, but.
Yeah, why don't we do that while we're here? All right, Article 1, which is the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit on any roadway inside a thickly settled or business district. It authorizes the selectmen to establish that.
And before we even get to Article 1, can I just ask one administrative question? The new time for this special town meeting is 7:30, as it's stated here, right?
It's supposed to be 7.
Yeah.
Let's
No.
move it back to 7:30.
Let's move to 7:30, because I just was at the Historic Commission, or the Historical Society meeting, and they were talking about the new time at 7 PM, and I'm sitting there, that's when we usually start, I think. But we moved it back a half an hour, I believe, right? Or did we
Well,
move it
Scott
forward?
wants to move the annual up a half an hour and start at 7. We usually start at 7:30.
Okay.
But apparently this one is still at 7:30.
It says 7:30.
This says 7:30, it's just that
And
I
that's the
heard,
governing, yeah.
so 7:30 is the time we want
7:30.
the fall special town meeting to start.
Right.
Got it.
But the
Okay.
spring annual town meeting will start at 7.
Why wouldn't
Okay.
we do this one at 7 too?
Because I think when this was typed up, whoever put it in here said 7:30.
But has it been
I
posted
don't
anywhere
care, I
yet,
just
or-
want to know
It's not been posted.
I think he felt that since there were so few
Short.
articles,
Yeah, no, I
that
agree
he
with that.
could
I
get
agree
through
with
them
that.
in one night, it wouldn't be a problem.
that's right.
But it would
Okay.
give more people the opportunity that work in town to get to the town meet, the
Flip side
special.
is if people use the 7:30, they won't show up at 7, they don't look at the time, they just
Yeah.
show up at the usual
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Okay.
okay.
So the time, 7:30, Monday, October 29th. We'll hopefully get that one done, and earlier than this meeting is going to get done on that evening. So Article 1, to see if the town will vote to accept the authorization of the Board of Selectmen to establish 25-mile-an-hour speed limit on any roadway inside a thickly settled or business district.
Yep, yep.
All right, Article 2, to see if the town will accept Chapter 90, Section 18B, authorizing the Board of Selectmen to establish designated safety zones having a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Yes.
Yep.
Article 3, to see if the town will vote to authorize the selectmen to accept a gift of land from the estate of Carol M. Stockman, consisting of an unimproved parcel of land containing approximately 11.8 acres located on the southerly side of Bridge Street and shown on the Medfield Assessor's Map 41, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
I have a question on this one. It's unfortunate Mike's not here. Is this, there was a piece of land that was offered to the town that was in payment for, I think, a tax deficiency?
This is not it,
This is the-
this is current in taxes.
This
They have
is,
to
so
be
this
current.
is literally a gift of the land?
Yeah, she left it in her will.
Okay, and is it literally locked in a way that it has to be conservation land, or does the will specify that?
The will specifies.
Will specifies that, okay.
There is access directly from Bridge Street. I
Okay.
don't know how wet it is or whatever, and there's some easements running through there, so whether you could do anything else with it, I don't know, but it's a nice piece of land for conservation recreation.
Okay, then I'm a yes.
Okay, Article 4, the Cultural Center.
Yes, and I already talked about the yes but part of it, so yes.
So my yes, but is I would add 2 more buildings, but other than that, I'm fine with the way it is.
You can make that amendment from the floor.
No, you
Buy one, get one free.
Won't be able to add to it.
All right, Article 5 is the senior,
Question on that?
if you have a microphone.
This will be a question.
How many?
Put it on the other discussion. I just noticed it said that to enact special legislation authorizing to town.
If deemed necessary or desirable.
Okay, so I kind of thought that was how it was meant to be read, but it starts, the if deemed necessary or desirable talks about authorizing the Board of, just the position of where that was. As long as it's understood, you're not anticipating having to go for special legislation, but just if by some chance you have to.
Well, first of all, to lease for that length is beyond the technical authority. If you actually wanted to go out to 99 years.
What is it, what is the?
35, I think. So,
Is Gene gonna hit me if I ask why is it 99 instead of 35?
I was told to draft 99, which is like the maximum legally. It's equivalent of ownership when you get out that far. It's like you actually own it.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of this is gonna be dealt with in
The,
the details of the
the motion
disposition
itself.
agreement as well. I
Right.
think when you actually sit down and negotiating the lease, because I don't think, and again, this is where I get to put my butt in, I don't think we're gonna agree on a 99-year lease. And there's gonna be terms in there, conditional on the fundraising and conditional on the feasibility and all of that.
Maybe shorter terms with the ability to
Yeah, I mean,
extend
I
or
think there'll be certain
something.
milestones in the process.
And you know
that-
how I feel about some of the other issues too, relating incentives and everything else.
Yes, yes, and so I think we'll have to sort kind of those details out, because I don't think it can be an open-ended thing without, because there's,
All right, I was just-
this is
I
out,
was just-
I think from my perspective, we want to give you the authority and the authorization you need to move forward on the fundraising and grant applications and all of that. And so if that doesn't work out, then we'll have to have a different, assuming we reach an agreement on this, which is, again, subject
And I'm
to, since we don't agree with
wholeheartedly-
each other, we'll have to figure out how it all sorts out, but,
So I'm wholeheartedly in support, by the way, of that. I just had some questions in here.
All right. Okay, Article 5 is the Senior Housing Residential Development Overlay District.
Yep.
Okay,
There have been some revisions. You're aware of that, I assume.
yes, that were sent around based on the planning board meeting last night.
Right.
I'll cover this in my selectman report as well, but we had an information session at the center last week for this. It was not very well attended, but I think the concerns about it were that, I think, kind of the same concerns that people have about the limits of their ability, what to do. But I think I think the message from Courtney and I was, this is probably the best we can do right now. And so, then Article 7
Can
is-
someone just summarize the changes? Because I didn't realize that there had been a bunch of changes made.
there weren't a lot of changes.
There's a memo from Courtney that's like got an executive summary in it.
Oh, that came a while ago?
No, it just came
It was based on
yesterday,
the
I
planning
think.
board last night.
Oh.
The planning board, they added, so the planning board split this into two articles. So there's Article 5, which has the residential development overlay district, which is essentially the same as what we looked at before. And then they added a use table in Article 6, just referencing the senior housing residential development overlay district. I can pull up on my phone here what the memo was.
I have it somewhere, I just can't put my finger on it right now.
Yeah, I think I have it here. Wow, we got a lot of emails. Let's see. So the changes, just the memo? Nope. This is what. So, let me see. I'm not seeing the memo. I do have an email from Courtney. Here, I can read what she says. Let's see, she writes, since last week, she added a definition for basements and public amenity, curbed unit size on townhouses, multifamily, clarified use authorizations for single two-family, and reduced the side yard setback in the BIIE. Though there's also a setback waiver authority written in for the planning board, and added a footnote to the density height requirements, making it clear as day the planning board can require a reduction in both for reasons that are generally stand up in court.
Oh, okay. That's interesting, because I actually thought I didn't remember the definition of basement that I read today. Good.
70% of outside wall, of the walls.
Yeah, it made me wonder how you're gonna define that. How much are you gonna follow it along and
Yeah, I guess.
do a laser
It's
survey?
been, it's been a problem when you're talking floor area ratio. We've had projects, including Old Medfield Village, where people choose to make it habitable, and that wasn't taken into account when the initial number of buildings was permitted.
I think in Newton now, if you want to pull a permit to renovate something, that they tell you to go hire a surveyor and tell them whether you have a basement or not in your house,
Yeah.
under the definition of the zoning.
They've got a very strict, they made the leading case law on floor area ratio is an ongoing battle out of Brookline, so.
All right, Article 7, the Hinckley property sale.
I have one question. The wording says that containing 5.4 acres according to said plan, together with access and utility easements over, under, and through abutting town-owned land known as Lot 3 ISS Road. I'm assuming this is kind of a normal, it's the normal easements. My question is anything in that, does that in any way impede what we can do with Lot 3 in the future? I'm assuming the.
Well, you've got control over it, but this lot is landlocked without that.
Right, so this is,
You either do that, or if nobody's gonna get in there.
so, yeah, no, I'm fine.
Okay.
That's good.
Uh,
So that's a yes.
Excuse myself on this one.
Yeah.
Oh, You're recused on 7, okay.
Or I'm a yes.
I'm a yes, Gus is a
You don't
yes.
want to fight about this.
No, I don't think so. Article 8,
This
turning
this
the
is the
town clerk
first,
to an appointed
Yes.
position.
this will be the first step. This is to recommend to put it on the ballot at the general election.
Okay, you're a yes?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
all right. Article 9, moving the annual town meeting from the last Monday in April to the first Monday in May.
Yes.
That's
So the only thing on Article 9 I didn't understand was the first sentence, to see if the town will vote to propose an amendment to the town charter to be submitted to the voters at the next annual town meeting for the election of officers.
That's the
that
March
supposed to
meeting.
word it?
Yes,
The March election.
right out of the statute.
It's the same as in Article 8.
Oh, is it the election or is it?
It's the
It's gotta be-
election,
Oh,
it's
it's
a
not the
ballot,
town meeting
no,
we're
it's a
referring-
ballot
You
question.
have to vote at the election to
The
change.
town meeting recommends to put it on the
At
ballot.
the next annual town meeting for the election of officers. Okay, got it. I don't think of an election as a town
I
meeting,
know.
but I get it. Okay. That's fine.
Article 9. Article 10, Council on Aging be open on Saturdays.
So I don't care about this edit being made unless it matters, and Mark, this is a question for you. The issue on this increase for the COA, I'm in favor of. It appears to me that they got, the initial funding was through a grant.
Yep.
As far as I can tell, everything that Roberta sent us back on this grant is that it has been well-received, and it seems like it's a good expansion of the COA program. The only thing I wanted to make sure is if we approve this here, that increase becomes part of the COA budget. It's not just like a one-time thing, and then COA is looking for it again. So I don't know whether it needs to specifically call out that this increased money is added to the COA budget.
Well, it's their budget for the rest of the fiscal year, and then the next fiscal year, their budget will be, it'll have to be addressed in a future fiscal budget each
Well, why not add it to the budget this year?
Oh, it is.
Exactly what I'm
That-
doing
for
is
the-
I'm basically saying if that then goes in as the budget baseline for the COA this year, they have that money for next year to continue this
Well, that's where it's
program.
going, but you're not bound, the COA and the town, nobody's bound for what happens in terms of expenditures and programs for a future fiscal year, no matter what.
For purposes of setting the Prop 2.5 limit, I'm trying to get this into where it's part of the base.
This is apparently, there's available funds to fund this, so it's not,
Right.
so it's not an issue, it's coming off, you're not increasing anything.
Or I'm trying to get it into the base for the COA as opposed to just
Well,
funds.
Prop 2.5 doesn't work that way.
Right,
The budgeting
the-
process does.
Right, I think your point, Gus, is this is not going to be a separate article on the annual town meeting warrant.
Right.
This is going to be part of the Council on Aging's budget to be open on Saturday.
And my real point is, if we think this is money worth spending, I think in this particular case, we should recognize it as a programmatic expansion of COA. We're not merely making a decision about whether to let this thing go for, until next June. We're actually making a programmatic decision that that this is a good thing, that we want to let the COA continue.
Right.
That's my real point.
Right, and I think what'll happen is next year, the COA will have to add to its budget a full year's worth of this expense.
Right.
Right, and so
That's right.
the COA's budget will increase by
Okay.
that amount. I
Okay,
think
so
I
no
agree.
change needed. I just
Yeah.
wanted to be sure we understood.
Yeah, no, I don't see this as, I think it's only a special article, because it's the only way to do it.
Yeah,
here.
okay. So it's a yes on
It's a
my
yes,
part.
and you're a yes on that, Pete? Article 11, to see if the town will vote to transfer a sum of money from the balance of funds appropriated for the iron manganese removal from the water supply under Article 34 of the 2018 annual town meeting for the purpose of studying and/or implementing the reduction of unaccounted-for water in the town's water supply. So you may have as well, I've had some discussions with Bill Harvey and Randy Carg and others about this. I mean, I think we've all learned recently of the water loss in the system. I think the exact number is not known yet. So there's two different ways that this can be done. And I think the Board of Water and Sewerage is discussing amongst themselves which way they want to do this. And so I think in the motion at the special town meeting, there will be a number. But Mark, I don't think they've decided yet which route they want to go.
Well,
unless they've decided. since the
Regardless
last
of what the overall cost of this is capped by whatever was appropriated here in the first place.
I think it's $600,000.
I don't know.
I think it's six, but I mean, both of the options are a lot less. I think the number, it's either 4 or 6. Both options they're looking at are less than the amount they appropriated for the iron manganese. I mean, one of the options is like $20,000, and the other, I think, is $250 or something like that. They have two different things they can do to try to figure out where the water is going. And one of them is to do a study of the water mains, and the other relates to the meters.
Right.
And so I think that the Board of
It's
Water and
basically
Sewerage
on the ground
figuring it out.
stuff.
Right,
I talked to Bill myself today,
yeah.
and the predicate that we've got this loss is strictly a matter of doing the figures based on what they have, and that shows an apparent unaccounted for water of, I think, 27%. But that's just taking certain numbers, doing certain subtractions, that's what you come down to. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the reality is.
It's just
out in the field.
unaccounted for. It's not
Right.
necessarily just dripping into the ground.
Right.
But I think for the way the state calculates our permit, I mean, that limits the amount of water we're allowed to draw, because we're only really allowed to draw 75% of what we're allowed to, because we're losing 25% according to the calculation. So if you can fix the calculation, it increases the
Yeah,
capacity.
we're very close to our maximum withdrawal at the moment with
Right.
this set of circumstances.
Right. So I think that it was a wise judgment from the Water and Sewer Board that, to focus on this issue now, rather than,
So this is money that's already been appropriated, they simply want to transfer it over for a different use.
right, because I mean, the purpose of the iron manganese project was to increase the amount of available water for the town. I think in a lot of ways, I mean, that's ultimately a really expensive project, when they ultimately build that thing. I think this is a way of potentially increasing the amount of available water through less expensive means.
That
to
was
deal
either
with-
going to be a filtration plant of some sort, or there was even a possibility of sinking another well because of some preliminary studies they did, but they never made a resolution on it.
But that was multi-millions.
Oh,
Yes.
big bucks.
All right, so we've gone through that. Why don't we run through our special town meeting votes? And the warrants is 7:30, so we'll have to adjust the agenda. Well, Evelyn's not here, but let's run through our special town meeting votes. So we have to vote to call the meeting, vote to open the warrant, vote to close the warrant, and vote to sign the warrant. While we're on this topic. I don't know if, well, Evelyn can take it off the video if she needs to. So why don't we start with, do we have a motion to call a special town meeting at 7:30 PM on October 29th, 2018?
I move that we call a special town meeting at 7:30 PM on October 29th, 2018.
At 7:30 PM.
7:30 PM.
Have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, do we have a motion to open the October 29th, 2018 special town meeting warrant?
I move to open the October 29th, 2018 special town meeting warrant.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone have additional articles to submit to the town meeting warrant beyond the 11 in the printed warrant currently? Hearing none, do we have a motion to close the October 29, 2018 special town meeting warrant?
Going once. Twice. Going three times. I move to close the October 29th, 2018 special town meeting warrant.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And do we have a motion to sign the October 29, 2018 special town meeting warrant?
I move to sign the October 29th, 2018 special town meeting warrant.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So we have covered that. We've covered the special town meeting articles. Is anyone else here on any particular item? Or can we run through, yes, ma'am? You could get your microphone and just tell everyone where you live and who you are.
I'm Eve Potts from 10 Green Street, Unit 8. I'm just here to make a short announcement that there's a new committee that has been formed. And again, their name is the Medfield Plastic Bag Reduction Initiative. And they had their first meeting the 30th of September, and it was had very good attendance of 15 people. And so they're planning a information forum in November for the public. So I'm just here to let the select people to know that this committee has been formed. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Could I actually ask a question on that? How does that committee relate to the people who came to talk to us, 6 months ago
Couple months
about?
Andy Costello came to talk
Yeah.
to
It
us.
is Andy.
So it is that, so it's that
That's
same
Andy
committee, it's just the
Costello.
committee
Yes,
is expanded?
And we were all very impressed with her organization skills. She had it all set going, and people were very enthusiastic. But it is Andy
Okay.
Costello.
We were impressed and told her to go forward and let people know.
I did provide her with a sample bylaw.
And I heard after that,
I will, as one selectman, make one other comment that maybe you could carry back to the committee.
Yeah.
Because I would hope that the committee will do this. When the presentation was first made, the one thing that I at least requested, I'm not sure if all three of us did, is that whatever proposal we come up with, that proposal be developed in talking with the stores in town to try to get to a proposed approach to this that is most palatable to the stores, as opposed to jamming it down the store's throat.
Yes,
So
and
as long as we're doing that, I'm in favor of what they're trying to do. It's just,
That was brought up,
Okay.
and everybody was very much in favor. And she also said, as you know, she wore the plastic bags at Medfield Days, and she said it was interesting because some people were kind of negative and kind of walked away. But again, you'll find that everywhere. But this forum is informative, but to get people's viewpoint. So it isn't going to be just what you said,
Good,
to
thank
push it down their throats.
That's
They
right.
want to, so she addressed all that in that first meeting, which was great.
The information that she gave us was quite remarkable, and I remember the 6 million bags that she figured that Medfield residents use
I
in a
know
year.
it, unbelievable. But I think, to me, I've learned a lot too, because just at that one meeting, as, again, I used the word recycling, and she said, no, it isn't that, it's reduction. Because right now, China won't take our bags anymore, and so we've got to cut down our use is the main thing that they're trying to emphasize.
She looked quite striking on Medfield Day.
Yeah, that's what I heard. She said it was quite an experience.
and I think that, I think a lot of the stores are heading that way already. I think Market Basket has said they're going to stop using them whenever they run out of however many they have now, they're going to stop using them.
Brothers here in town.
And they already will, Market Basket already will give you your stuff in, extra cardboard
That's
boxes.
good, because they
and all
use
that.
those plastic bags like crazy otherwise.
Yeah.
Oh, they do, it's terrible how much they use.
Isn't it 81 towns and cities have already banned them?
Yes.
In Massachusetts? Yeah,
And I heard from a
81.
gentleman in town here who works for a company who's got a replacement plastic bag, and it's not plastic, but that biodegrades in like 200 days or something. And it looks and feels like a plastic bag, and so
And all that being said, this cries out for the general court to enact a uniform statute.
Yeah, but they haven't been.
when do they meet again? When's the next time? When are they back at work? In the new year? Right, okay. Thank you. Peter Gus, do you have any preferences on where we go next?
Nope.
You want to take up the town administrator position then? Oh, sure. Is that good to go? Okay. So we have on here kind of the final decision here on whether to offer the position to Christine. And let me just offer a couple of thoughts up front on this, because, you know, we've talked about this over the course of the summer, and I've gotten some input from other people around town about it, and had more time to think about it. And I think, you know, the real decision is sort of a process one that we made, which is whether we're going to sort of conduct a search, hire a search firm, and kind of throw everybody into the mix, or look first at whether to promote Christine. And the more I've thought about it, I think the more comfortable I am with the approach that we've chosen. Because as you think about which is evaluating Christine in the first instance, if you think about the amount of information we have on her versus any other candidate, if at this point, you know, we don't really know kind of one way or the other, I don't know that the process of, you know, public hiring would lend itself to getting anywhere near the amount of information that we have. Because obviously it's got to be conducted according to the open meeting law. If you have somebody who, in another town who the people don't like, or don't think he does a good job, they're not necessarily going to come here and tell us, oh, by the way, this person I now work with is really bad at their job. You shouldn't hire them. You should leave them in the next office to me, right? I mean, it's just not really, you know, how it's going to go. And I think when you think about the skills that you have to have for a town administrator, there's sort of the kind of on paper piece of it, right? The technical knowledge of the job, the knowledge of potential procedures and policies and all that. And in a lot of ways, I mean, that's, not that it's unimportant, but a lot of that stuff is available, right? So if you ask the question, like, how are they going to be on, whether it's the budget or procedures or changing things that need to be changed, I mean, those kinds of procedural issues, you can kind of figure out, right? And that's an issue for the Board of Selectmen to deal with, it's an issue for other boards to deal with. The harder thing to evaluate, where, you know, Christine stands out, at least in my experience with her, is the other aspects of it, right? I mean, the work ethic, the judgment, managing people. I mean, I think in having, you know, worked with her during my time on the warrant committee, and then also worked with her especially over the past couple of years on the Board of Selectmen, I mean, the amount of time she puts in, the dedication she has, is really exceptional. And you can't measure it, right? You can't measure it and say, you know, that somebody coming in, they may work really hard. Everybody thinks they work really hard. You ask anybody, you work really hard, very few people are going to say, I really don't. You know, I kind of just do the bare minimum. Like, but there's plenty of people who think they work really hard and don't. And I've been especially impressed with all of the issues we've dealt with over the course of the past 2 years, and the extra work that's been asked of our, you know, town officials, town employees, town administrators, and Christine. I mean, she's, you know, just tonight the question came up, like, who to go to. We don't have a facilities director, we'll go to Christine, right? It's kind of like, it's kind of the answer if there's no other answer, well, she'll figure it out. And the responsibility she's had in the hospital, I think the amount of work that was put in by her and others around the Medfield Meadows and the housing production plan. And even looking at that issue, kind of thinking about specific policy questions, I mean, that's something she worked on, you know, years before, you know, the elected boards of the town ever got to adopting it, right? I mean, so she was sort of on it, and it was not adopted by the elected boards of the town, right? And if we had, I think we might have avoided a lot of the tumult and difficulty that we had. And smaller things too. I mean, even on budgetary questions, I mean, there was an issue that came up when I was still on the warrant committee. I think it might have been during the year you were off in between. And there was a real, you know, question about there was a request to declare a snow emergency, and there was some questions about budget issues in there, and she kind of got in there, sorted it all out. We figured out we didn't need to declare a snow emergency because there was stuff in supposedly that was in the ice budget that shouldn't have been. And she figured it out. She dealt with it, I thought, in a reasonable way, but was pretty strong in dealing with another kind of veteran town official on that particular question. And so, in thinking about all of that stuff and whether I thought she would be good at the job, I've come to the conclusion I think she would be excellent. And with that conviction, I don't think it would be fair to say, well, I'm now going to throw it open to everybody else and you know, be dazzled by somebody with a resume who may be great, who may not. But, you know, given all of that, I think, you know, under most circumstances, I think conducting a search and going through that process is helpful. It's helped us in other areas. I think here where you have someone who's been in the position she's been as long as she has and had that time to demonstrate to the people who've worked closest with her, you know, her competence and her ability and dedication. And I think, as I said, somewhere in the discussion, I mean, obviously, there's gonna be changes when you move on from a 44-year veteran town administrator, and I think some things need to be changed and improved, and if I thought, she was only gonna do things exactly
At
the way.
least changed.
What's that?
It will only be 39 years, 11 months.
Oh, because of the title.
No, because if I retire in January, I start in February.
Oh, okay. So why did I think it was 44 years? It's not 44 years.
Well, it is, I rounded it.
Oh. Okay, we'll give you credit for that. So, again, if I thought this was a matter of saying you're promoting someone just because they're gonna do things exactly the same way going forward, I don't think I wouldn't be in favor of it, but I think she will, take the best of the way we've done things, but also recognizes there's things we need to do differently and need to improve upon as we have been over the past several years. So, in these discussions, and some of the people I spoke to, had very thoughtful things to say about it, and I appreciated the input, and some of those folks didn't agree with this particular approach, and I appreciated their input, but as I've thought about it more and kind of scrutinized my own thinking on it, I think I've become more comfortable with this approach, more comfortable with the idea that in this circumstance, we got to promote Christine. I think it's not a matter of her tenure deserving it, right? It's, you don't get it just because you've been here, but I think because she has that ability and the skill to do it would be excellent. I think that's what we got to do. So that's just my opening statement to this discussion, and I'll throw it open to Pete and Gus.
I guess I would say that I think that Christine has earned it. I think that she deserves it at this point. And I think that we'll be well-served to go ahead and hire her.
Yeah, and I would endorse the basic points that you made. There's three things I'd add. Actually, four things I'd add. One is the spontaneous endorsements when we've talked about doing this that have come from a number of different places in the town. To include your immediate one when we first brought it up here in a meeting, but not just yours. It's that there's endorsements that have come up from a bunch of different places in town, which tells me that she's widely respected, which means something to me. We have gone through significant turnover in our key leadership here in town. We still face some difficult issues. And I think she's somebody who has both the relationships and the style. And based on the comments that she made to us when we asked her to talk to us in August, that actually impressed me, because some of the issues that she brought up and some of the ideas she had, A, I hadn't thought of some of them, and B, I didn't have any idea that she had those ideas, that she told me that she was thinking critically. The other piece that as I look back on, there are things that get taken care of here in this town by people like Christine, who can handle hard grounders, and without having it all blow up and get everybody in a tiz, they just get dealt with. She's very emotionally non-reactive, so she doesn't add to the problem, but she sees what's going on. She has good relationships. She understands the dynamics, and I have a funny feeling that I only appreciate at most a quarter to a third of the issues that Christine has handled, because the other 2/3 or however 3/4 she's handled without a lot of fanfare. They just take care of it. And I think, as I look to where the town, I think, needs to head in the coming years, someone who is interested in working to build bridges in places that it's helpful to have those bridges built, someone who is good at dealing, not a pushover, not a roll, you can't roll her over, but who sees clearly but understands how to orchestrate the resolution on those things. I think there'll be a shift, just to comment briefly with Mike. Mike, you've got the rock-solid financial stuff, and as I've seen it, in many ways, Christine has handled a lot of the detailed operational stuff. I actually can picture a little flip-flop there where the person taking over for you will actually be probably doing more of that operational stuff. And this, I don't know whether you'll like this or not, and we'll be looking for another young Mike Sullivan to come in here with the financial skills to kind of make sure that we've got all that stuff. Not that she doesn't have them, it's just that I think there'll be a flip-flop in the tone.
Are you saying I'm old?
No, I'm saying you're good at finances.
That's why he said another young Mike Sullivan. We have one young Mike Sullivan here, and we're looking for another young Mike
I
Sullivan.
am. When people ask me, how do you feel about getting old? I said, I'm not getting old. I am old. I think everybody thinks that I know everything about town finances. What they don't realize is we have Joy and Georgia and Yvonne and Matt, who are all superb financially, and we all work together. We get together and sit down, and a lot of what you think I have done myself has been a collaborative effort. So you have a very good financial management team, even without me. So.
Right, and I think we'll have to have, assuming no one changes their mind between now and when we vote on this in 30 seconds, that, we'll have to have a discussion with Christine about the assistant town administrator position and how that will work, and kind of, ideally, assuming we're able to reach good overall terms on terms of employment, ideally, we'd be able to do a search and have that person be able to come in and be in place, when Mike retires. And so Mike can help that person as well, kind of during the 18 to 24 months, Mike will be continuing to help us out. How long is it going to be again? 3 days?
And I'm going to suggest we have a broader conversation with Christine about exactly how several roles at the top of the town administration are configured and how they work. It may not just be complete one-for-one swap-outs.
Right. No, I think that's exactly
A TA can't do it all, and they gotta put his or her strengths and decide what they wanna
Right.
delegate.
Right.
All right. Well, there being no further discussion, do we have a motion?
I move that we extend an offer to Christine Treeweiler to take on the post of town administrator, replacing Mike Sullivan upon his retirement,
Subject to
subject to mutually arriving at a mutually agreeable contract. And she doesn't have to pass any physical tests like the policemen do, does she?
Second.
just the obstacle course.
All in
She does a
favor?
lot of heavy lifting.
All right, very good. All right, Gus, you had mentioned the last time you wanted to talk about the composition of the townwide master plan.
I did, yeah,
and
okay.
Committee and all that, so why don't we go to that next, because I think a lot of the other stuff under action items are just contracts and stuff to sign.
Give me a second. I can never organize, there was a lot of stuff to organize.
There was a lot of stuff
I did
this
it
week.
exactly in the order of
And I
the
was very grateful. Evan,
agenda,
for you putting
and
stuff in
it's
your
done me no
folder
good.
and slipped and all that.
That's
Usually I just
what they
print it out,
overlooked when they did
Oh, yeah, it's all pieces.
kind of.
code. That's why
I finally ran out of time when I could not, there we go. I couldn't find the second set of minutes, but I said, we're not gonna get to the minutes today anyway. So I saw the draft of the charter for the townwide master plan, and actually, I think some of the comments that I've heard since were reinforce some of the thoughts that I had. First, around who should be on the steering committee, the draft identified several people, but I said we ought to have a senior representative, we definitely should have someone from the schools, we should look at having a business representative, we should have a representative from the permanent building committee.
That was on there. That's the PP and BC.
Okay.
I'm looking at the,
Oh, I'm looking at this. This is all, I don't
this is
know.
this is the list that,
I haven't seen that.
oh, okay.
So, or at least if I got it, I didn't register it.
She might have handed it out at that.
Okay, I haven't seen that. Well, so you can hear what I'm saying, and then I also, so the town planner certainly, but then I said, should somebody from the town administration be on? It may be the town planner's enough, so I wasn't necessarily, I was sensitive to how many people I was throwing on this committee. Somebody from the treasurer was a question mark, mainly because we don't really have the finance representation here, and then water and sewer was another one that seemed like we should have. So those were voices that if we're talking about a townwide master plan, seem like they should be voices included in the conversation.
So, all right, so, and for a couple of those, I think the town planner, I think those positions are usually ex officio in those committees, and they're not voting members of the committees.
That's okay. Yeah, I didn't get into that piece of it,
Yeah,
but
so I agree with you in terms of having either, from the treasurer's office, the accountant's office, or something like that as part of it.
Yep.
So right now, that would mean Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, Warrant Committee, Concom, Permanent Planning and Building Committee, and you would have the Council on Aging, appointing somebody,
Yeah, Council on Aging at schools?
School Committee. Yeah, I think we had mentioned that actually at the meeting on the 4th, Pete. I think you had suggested the school committee be added.
I think the schools should be part of
Yeah.
it, certainly.
So
I
I think-
said a representative from the business
Not sure
community.
that
Yeah, the business community,
And water and sewer, I think.
water and
yeah.
sewer.
And I think that, and you get to find it, you got the treasurer there, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Those are the
thinking
ones that
about-
came to mind for me. It makes for a big committee, but that's pretty
Well,
complex.
if you did the treasurer and the town planner as ex officio
Mhm.
members from the town, then you
Yep.
did Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, Warrant Committee, Concom, Permanent Planning and Building Committee, Council on Aging 6, Business Committee 7, Water and Sewer 8, School Committee 9, then you could do 3 at large, you have a 12-person committee, or you
Mhm.
could do 6 at large, and have a 15-person committee. I mean, I think, you know, it's a big committee,
Mhm.
it's a lot of issues, and so, I mean, maybe I would say 15, you know, you need 8 for a quorum. If you had 15 people on the committee, it would make it, you'd be able to have subcommittees on some of the different, because it's pretty
Mhm.
easy
Yeah.
here to give the different programs to break into subcommittees
Yeah.
of the different pieces of it.
Which is what towns usually do.
Yeah, and so that would certainly counsel for a larger committee,
Mhm.
and then they can get a lot of work done sort of in subcommittee groups, kind of feeding back into it. How does that sound to you, Pete?
That sounds fine.
All right, so do we want to tentatively then set it at 15 members, and we'll add a representative of the business community sort of as one of the Board of Selectmen at-large
Mhm.
appointments. So, you know, we'll say we have 7 at-large appointments, one of whom should be, or shall be, or we shall
Mhm.
endeavor to be a representative of the business community.
Mhm.
And then Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, Warrant Committee, Concom, Permanent Planning and Building Committee, Council on Aging, Water and Sewer, School Committee. And I think they don't necessarily have to be members of those committees. It can be their designee, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, I think we'll need to get then just a note to all of those folks, because I don't know, I know the planning board, obviously, Sarah talked to them, but, Evelyn, do you think you could put together a short memo just to those committees that we could send out and ask them to designate people to be on this committee?
Planning board.
Planning board already did, we're
Yeah.
one down. So, in the Board of Selectmen, we know about it. So it'd be to the Warrant Committee, the Concom, the Permanent Planning and Building Committee, Water and Sewer, Council on Aging. And then we've got to find someone from the business community. I've got a couple of people who are interested already, but, and then we'll just tell Georgia and Sarah that they're on the committee, ex officio. And then Sarah will really be the one managing and quarterbacking.
So then I had 2 one comment and kind of guess one request. The one, as I was going through this, there was a comment that was made, I think it was way back in the before the town meeting when we were talking about $150,000 for the master planning effort, and someone got up and said, listen, there's another $150,000, we're gonna go hire a consultant, and the consultant's gonna do the master plan. I'm totally in agreement with the objection that person had to the idea that we're hiring someone to develop a master plan. So the question for me is, so if we have $150,000 to hire a consultant, but do we actually know what it is we want that consultant to do? I don't believe that consultant should be the person guiding us through the master plan. I can see that consultant potentially being a facilitator of the activities of the committee. I could see that consultant being someone who might help out with the public outreach from an informational standpoint. But this leads to the third point. I'm not smart enough about right now, Mark, is our master plan, the state, if I follow this correctly, the state actually specifies some requirements for what a town master plan has to do, I think.
In the statute.
It's in the so I need to actually get myself smarter about what the statute says. So, because my head,
It's like 9 categories.
so if it's only the organization, the master plan, it's not a problem, but if there's an administrative purpose to the master, my head's all around the strategy for the town, and we do a master plan that explains what our strategy and priorities are.
Right.
But if the state has imposed administrative requirements on that master plan that meet administrative requirements of the state, I need to know what those are.
I mean, they're really just, it tells you what they have to include.
Okay, well,
It's got to
that's-
include a
so-
goals and policy statement, a land use plan element, a housing element, an economic development element, natural and cultural resources element, open space and recreation element, services and facilities element, circulation element, and implementation program element. And then, some of which can be, be, the first drafts of which can be taken from existing plans. So if
Yeah.
we have an open space and recreation plan, that's the starting point for the master plan in that area.
So the way I'm picturing, so that's fine, if that's all it is, then if it's that simple, I'm sitting there saying, I'm not even sure how big a job this is, because we do have some plans that have already been developed that literally are the chapter in the master plan that needs to fit in. The one piece that's missing for me, and I don't have a good process for getting there, but there are certain critical strategic decisions the town should think about and decide on. You know, to pick one that, had we been doing this years ago, would have been, where do we want to put the Parks and Rec facility? Not from a technical feasibility study thing, but from the standpoint of, from a strategic standpoint, is the right answer, up by the hospital? Is it down by Wheelock? Is it in the middle of town? How do we actually think about that and decide what to do? I'm guessing that there's 10 questions that are like that.
I think we should put those into the charter for this committee.
Yeah, I think we
That
should.
is- And put it into the RFP. So when we're doing, I think, as I understand it, I'd have to look back at because I think it was even before you were on the board that we got the presentation from the committee about this. But the consultant does, if you look at the master plans that other towns do, it's probably not as long as the state hospital master plan, but it's long enough and there's enough technical stuff in it that it would be hard pressed to ask a committee of volunteers to generate the master plan itself. And so, I think what the consultants do, they bring the technical expertise of the particular areas so they can help guide you in looking at the town. Okay, if you're talking about zoning, one of the objectives we have is sort of expanding our commercial base. They might be able to provide technical assistance. Okay, here's areas where you might look at your zoning to enhance that piece of it. Same thing with some of the land use elements, some of the economic development elements. And then they do the public outreach and facilitation. I think they will probably do the first drafts of master plans in response to the feedback from the public and the committee and all of that. And so towns have done it different ways. Some towns sort of do it in the way the committee had kind of laid it out for us, and some towns kind of do it a combination of existing staff and volunteers. That's a longer process, because it's sort of, you're doing it in between everything else. And so we kind of, the 150 is sort of the 18-month process, right? You hire the consultant, they do a lot of the heavy lifting on putting the plan together, kind of dealing with the technical elements of it. The content of it, the substance of it, comes from the committee, from the Board of Selectmen, from the planning board, from the town. But the assembly of all the stuff, the managing the outreach process, similar to a role that Kathy McCabe had played with respect to the Medfield City Hospital Master Planning Committee, I think there's a little bit more of a method for doing this. And so if you look at the master plans of other towns, even look at our old master plan or ones the other towns that have done, it's not something that a committee of volunteers, even in a town planner, could really put together on anything like that.
So that piece bothers me a little. So the fundamental point I'm making is I would not want to see the consultant take control of the process.
No.
I don't have a problem with consultants.
They will if you don't have the right consultant, and the right skill sets on the committee.
Right. So that's my concern.
It's very important, as I said, that previously, that the people on the committee bring certain skill sets to the table, not just that they meet whatever criteria you just laid out for where they come from, but they actually have a certain kind of ability.
And actually, one of the people who reached out, who's interested in it, is a planner.
Yeah, well, and I'm sitting here saying, this is a.
Duncan, remember, he wrote to you a while ago, Jay Duncan.
Oh, yeah, it's in there.
Yeah.
This has a town that has executive level people who live here, who, many of them probably do this kind of thinking for a living. Certainly, there's consultants who live here that do it, but, that's my point, is it's like, I actually think we have resources that can do this, and for sure, people have opinions when they come to selectmen's meetings, so they put them into good
Right.
use.
But what the consultant can give you is, is a format to work with.
Yep.
And also, you're also required not just to have the plan, but basically implementation steps you have to outline. So, in Medway, when we did the last update, which I was a part of, they produced a very, and it was done in-house. But we had a very detailed matrix that was developed with the plan and then the action items under each part and who was gonna be responsible for it. And then there was actually, the planning person up in Medway is very proactive. She actually followed up after a period of time with the various boards and commissions to see what was the status of accomplishing those various action items.
So I'd push for it even a step beyond that, because you don't want a static, it's great that there's follow-up on what the static document said you were gonna do, but in fact, in the same way, I think we're talking about the goal, the selectmen's goals, and is that it's not a question of, okay, here's the goals, now let's come back to it in 10 years. It's a matter of, no, there's this cycle that you go through where you take a look, once you've got it, then it's a lot easier to sit there and keep it up, because you don't change everything every year. You look at the 3 things that suddenly pop to the top of the list and you modify it, but this plan itself is merely a thing that supports a process, which is the strategic planning that you go through on a continuing basis. That's what I would see. we should
Why this
start.
takes particular thought, aside from the fact that having a master plan probably helps you out with various grants, this legislation that's been sitting up at the State House and keeps percolating, the land use reform, is tying in local zoning to a master plan. It's basically saying you gotta have a master plan and your zoning has to be consistent with it. So you don't just put a master plan like you were saying, and just put it on the shelf and go merrily on your way in terms of zoning. The zoning has to be consistent with that master plan. If this legislation passes, or there would be adverse consequences to the municipality. So it's gonna take some thought, some really hard thought about addressing the issues, not just frankly what you want, but what the state's also pushing. And we're hearing all about workforce housing and affordable housing and all that coming from the state, because that furthers the state economy, and they're expecting the municipalities to each pick up their share of the load. And so that's being pressed on you, and that's something that your consultant
But
needs to be
even
familiar
there,
with.
if you just look at the strategic, master plan and say, well, this thing's a living document, you could also grind yourself down from a bureaucracy standpoint. But if the organization of that document is made up of, say, an affordable housing plan is one of the things that's there, well, the update isn't really the master plan update. The update is the affordable housing plan gets updated, and there's all these things inside the master plan. There may be those strategic questions.
Yeah, we've actually proceeded on a number of things that probably would be action items under the master plan. We've done those independently, so it's a matter of coordinating them into the master plan.
Right, some of this, I think likely, there won't be big changes to what we already have, and some of it will have to be newly done, but, all right, we'll reach out to these committees and see who they want to come up with for their designees in these areas. We may not get the full group together by October 16th, but I think there's enough room in this overall schedule. And we'll try to put together, I'll take a crack at a first draft of a charter for the committee, but and we can come with other questions and things to be added to that. I'll put that on my list to do. All right. All right. This next one is, I dropped the ball on this, potential guidance for Parks and Recreation and Council on Aging concerning building projects. I drafted a memo, actually started drafting it back in the spring. And I revised it recently with just some of that were my thoughts on there are 2 building projects that are sort of percolating around that would be addressed to both of them and the Permanent Planning and Building Committee, which now has to review these projects in advance. And the thrust of it is, and I'll bring it to the next meeting, and I apologize for not doing this to get your input on it. I thought it could form the basis, if you were interested, of sort of a guidance document. Then the thrust of the guidance is essentially that they both ought to look at how their programs fit, not only in potential new buildings or expanding buildings that they have, but how they fit in existing town buildings, and how they each might work together as they look at their building projects, where there is overlap or potential synergies, so that where they have programs that are running at different times or in different places or different ways, and that the thought should not, the initial thought should not be, these things can only happen in buildings that are our buildings and controlled by us, looking at it more from a programmatic standpoint and how they can cooperate, and if
That's a
there
good
are
idea.
different ways to do it, and also looking at it in connection with the potential Dale Street building project. You know, so for example, one of the things that Parks and Rec really wants is a gym, right? Presumably, there will be a gym of some kind attached to a potential new Dale Street school. Is it more cost-effective and efficient for the town if, you know, the new gym for the town is built there, and they can run some of their programs in there nights and weekends? I mean, it would be bigger and better than the current Dale Street gym, which is not a regulation gym. So just stuff like that. There's none of it's prescriptive. It's mostly just along those lines. But I'll bring that to the next meeting, and we can add to that. So I apologize. It was on me to print it out, and I got
I'm actually glad you didn't, because I'm reading all day long.
caught up with other. Well, this one was very short, so, okay, let's get back to, we've covered our discussion items. Let's get back to our action items. We got a vote to sign the November 6th, 2016 election warrant.
18.
November 6th, 2018, what did I say? 2016? Anyone want to do over that one? Anyway.
Election fraud.
November 6th, 2018. Do we have a motion?
I move that we vote to sign the November 6th, 2018 election warrant.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, library trustees, we did that. Transfer station recycling committee member Steve Catnese submitted his resignation, we got that. We were invited to attend the Troop 89 Eagle Scout Court of Honor on November 24th, 2018. I think the time is still TBD. I don't have a time, it's usually 2 o'clock, but that's probably, that's the Saturday after Thanksgiving. We have to vote to sign the certificate of achievement for Benjamin Lewis Rothstein for the Court of Honor to be held a week from Saturday, October 13th, 2018. Do we have a motion?
I move that we sign the certificate of achievement for Eagle Scout Benjamin Lewis Rothstein, Court of Honor, to be held on October 13th, 2018.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And as of right now, I plan to be there. Peter Gus?
I cannot make it.
I'm going to be there, too.
Okay, so Pete and I will be there. One of us
Great,
will take the
Appreciate
certificate.
it.
DPW Director Maurice Goulet requests the selectmen to vote to give him authority to dispose of town surplus vehicles and equipment. I gotta say, when I saw this, I was surprised at how much there was of surplus vehicles and equipment.
I was surprised at how little it was worth.
That too.
How old it was.
Yeah. I mean, do you know, Mike, do you know what we've been doing with all this stuff for, is it still in use, or are these things just sort of
I
sitting
think
there?
he's cleaning out the garage or a lot of stuff that, in the prior garage, there was a bit of hoarding going on up in the attic, so I think it's good.
Well, my issue here is twofold. And Mark, maybe this is the only way we can do it, but the total value of these 10 items based on, or the estimated value of these fundamentally as scrap was $2,345. And so what he was saying is DPW recommends these items through a reputable company are listed and published through an online auction. And I'm sitting there saying, why aren't we just hauling these things up 109 to the junkyard that's over there in Norfolk, I think is where it is, haul it in and say, what will you give us for scrap metal value on these things? The reason I ask that is these 10 things together are worth $2,345. I have a son who scrapped a 2002 car and got something like $600 for that car alone on scrap metal value, and these are pickup trucks. So there's a piece, if there's a legal reason why we have to go through a convoluted contracting process in order to release equipment,
Yeah,
it
there's
seems like
also-
it's costing us a lot of money to do that.
It's addressed in 30B as well, but it's tied into the valuation. And then we have a town bylaw on it as well.
It's right there, yeah.
So there's our authority to do it, but say that again, I was reading that when you were talking.
30B addresses disposition as well, but this probably is below the values that trigger that, but I don't know that for a fact. He may think he can get more even though these are the values he's put on them for this purpose.
My reaction would be to say, they're just judging by the
I'm
ages.
sure he's gonna try to get the most money he can for the item, so he probably, it's like, for auction purposes, it's an auction estimate, it's like conservative. That's what I'm guessing.
I'm wondering why we're putting so much effort into it rather than just going and getting in touch with the local junkyard.
I believe he's been in touch with somebody that conducts online auctions for this stuff, and with good
Are
results.
we doing Craigslist, or are we doing?
Well, it's municipal.
I just I don't understand why we're going. In other words, if you go through somebody who's conducting an online auction, that tells me they get a commission. And I'm sitting there saying, these numbers are so far off that it just go down the road, unless there's a legal reason why we can't just get rid of it that way. It just seemed to me this was an awfully bureaucratic way to go. about getting
All
this.
he needs from you is the authorization to dispose of it, and then beyond that, it's whatever he decides is best business practice.
And one would assume that
Scrap-
he would use the best business practice and get the town the most money, so.
Well,
Scrap
so
iron.
that's the part that I'm
Yes.
challenging. When I see these numbers, I'm saying, I don't see this as best business practice. I mean, the best money.
Scrap iron right now is going for $110 a ton. That's what we get paid by Framingham Salvage for the scrap iron that we take up there, or they come and pick up.
It's been impacted by
It's-
international things.
It's 6 of one, half dozen another. If Mo wants to do it that way, and he can get a couple of thousand is probably, the highway department is probably a good chunk of money. So, might not seem a lot, but, it can
I mean, how
buy
would you
some
prefer to
tools.
do it?
I would have just said, why don't you just bring the stuff down to the junkyard right up the road on 109 and ask them what they'll give you for it?
Well, they'd still need your permission to do
No,
that,
no, I
too.
do that, yeah, but, so,
Yeah, but
it's
he-
unfortunate Mo's not here. You hear, I'm not talking about not letting them get rid of these 1996 trucks. I'm sitting there saying, is this really the best way for us to get rid of scrap if this is what they're worth? And we're going through an online auction, when in fact you could probably drive 5 miles up the road. And my interest here is in getting more money for the town. This is not I'm not gonna say we can't do it. I'm not gonna fall on my sword. I'm making a point. This is pathetic. This seems to me to be incredibly low for the value for scrap when we're getting rid of something like 7 vehicles. I don't know about those other 3 things, but we're getting rid of 7 vehicles, and all 7 of them, it's $100. I mean, I'd take that 2002 and put it on Craigslist here in Medfield, see if any young kid wants to buy it and fix it up. Well, I'd probably pay you more than $100 for it. I made my point. I move that we authorize Mo to dispose of these scrap vehicles.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. All right, so we have a request from Mo for us to award the joint purchase bid for salt to Eastern Minerals, but I didn't see anything in here on that.
I didn't either.
I think that's through that consortium.
No, I know, but usually we get a memo or something that has the bids forms on it. And
Isn't that in there?
I flipped through this section here,
Yeah, you got it.
yeah, I
We'll
don't,
take this.
back through here,
We only have
I
two.
don't think it was in the,
Oh, it only came in today.
well, there's,
That's why.
but it was on the agenda.
Yes, they asked for, to be placed on the agenda.
Looks like it's the low bid circumstance.
At least this is a contract you can review in all of 10 seconds if you can do it. Like, so I move that we vote to award the joint purchase salt bid for 2018 to 2019 to Eastern Minerals for CC Salt, solar salt, price of $47.50 each, and each ton, and to Morton Salt, the bid for treated salt, price $71.77 per ton.
Second.
All in
Buy
favor?
that stuff cheaper
Yep.
than that, the brothers get this.
Going with the name brand, Morton Salt.
Morton Salt.
All right, we are requested to vote to authorize me to sign the draft audit report for the Wheelock School building project.
one minor question, where's the $159,000 go? Does it go back into the general fund?
I think it goes back in the,
This is the money.
Boiler replacement?
We have a snow deficit. If the money comes in before the assessors set the tax rate, it will be used to reduce that snow deficit and will reflect on this year's tax rate. Otherwise, it will close to free cash at the end of
The point is,
Yeah.
this one comes, as I recall, we funded this through a special, I think it was an override when we first passed the, or else we,
It was
money
a-
came out of the town to do the boiler project, the money coming back in is going back to the town, that's all I want to say.
Taken an unbelievably long time to get.
Yeah, yeah,
I think it was 2 or 3 town meetings ago when they originally voted for this.
right. So,
Although I think a lot of communities had big deficits this year, so they may try to rush it through so they can help with setting this year's tax rate.
so you're all set, yeah?
Yeah.
I move that we vote to authorize Chairman Marcucci to sign the draft audit report for the Wheelock School boiler replacement project.
Second?
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye. You want to do that thing on Teresa, or are you skipping that?
Well, I think we haven't,
Wait.
yeah, we'll do the rest of it. I think it should be great. I think it's fun
Yeah,
to have her on there.
Absolutely.
All right, then we have, so we did the DCR Recreation Trails and the Cultural Facilities Fund, so MAPC Hazard Mitigation Plan update.
You'll recall there was an article at town meeting to appropriate $4,875 to fund the hazardous mitigation. With this grant, and we can contribute some things we've already done as our 25% share, so we will more than likely not need to use any of that $4,875. And I've talked to Joy Rashudo, and she will close it to free cash at the end of fiscal 19. So we put the article at town meeting just in case we didn't get the grant, but getting the grant, we won't need it.
Okay. That makes it even easier. Editorially, when I read the MAPC contract, I found myself wondering, so much of it was community outreach, that I was sitting there saying, why is there all, it felt like a political program to me, that's like, well, you have to do this to get the plan, to get the FEMA grants, and you need to do the things you need to do. When I
MAPC
looked at the underlying contract and saw the items that we had called out, the hazard mitigation items, I saw that it was thoughtfully developed about the things we thought we needed to do in town. So I had lots of questions to start with, but then when I looked at the other one, it's like, okay, this does reflect things that we would want to do.
Yeah,
it's a
and you have to update that plan in order to be eligible for federal and state reimbursements on a lot of grants.
Motion?
I move that we, so all three of us sign this one, or?
I think just me.
We authorize Sharon Marcucci to sign the contract for the professional services of MAPC for the hazard mitigation plan update.
Second.
All in favor? Yep. So now we have 2 requests to sign the Massachusetts Housing Partnership Agreement for technical assistance with the pending Rose Bay proposal and the pending Dale Street Medfield Green project. This is the standard money that we get from the state to help review the technical aspects of both of these projects. I think it's up to $15,000 that comes with this. So we can pay for, water consultants and all that sort of stuff, so.
You want 2 separate motions?
Yeah, let's get 2 separate motions.
I move that we sign the Chapter 40B Technical Review Assistance Application for the Medfield Green project.
No.
Right, that's, Dale.
Yep.
Medfield Green project is what it's called.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
And I move that we vote to approve the Chapter 40B Technical Review Assistance Application for the Rose Bay at Medfield project.
Second?
All in favor?
Yep.
Where is that? Just so I can-
That's the Tilden Village. Tilden Village expansion. Not technically part of Tilden Village, but of a piece with Tilden. All right, now we requested to vote to authorize me to sign the standard contract form for the $30,000 grant to provide public awareness and education on suicide prevention.
I have one question, who's the authorized signatory? It's blank.
Well, the request on the agenda is for me to sign it, and usually.
No,
on
you're
this-
not, no, this is the page.
Oh,
You're
oh.
signing, accepting it, but you're
Oh,
also
oh, right.
designating who is the authorized
Right.
signatory to take the $30,000.
Dispose-
Right now, it's a blank check.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have to add who that would be. It's usually either Mike or Christine. In this
It
case,
probably would be the treasurer collector, I would think, because that's who the state will usually send the money to.
So Georgia?
They do it as part of their monthly distribution of state
Okay, so we should
funds.
add in here, just,
Georgia Kalivas?
you wanna type it in, or should I just handwrite it
I
in?
think they're usually handwritten,
Handwritten.
unless they're filled in.
Write it, okay, I'll try to write it very neatly.
Treasurer. And
Your title is treasurer collector?
Yes.
slash collector. And I move that we vote to authorize Chairman Marcucci to sign the standard contract form regarding the $30,000 award to provide public awareness and education on suicide prevention.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
All right, next one. Vote to sign the standard contract form relating to the town's hazard mitigation plan update. Medfield has received a FEMA award in the amount of $14,625 for this project.
And once again, there is no authorized signatory name, and the forms toward the end of of this are all blank. So this isn't actually completed.
I know Sarah prepared that grant application, so I would,
Just send
but
it
again,
back
I
to-
would,
Yeah, if we could,
I would say it would be the chairman of the selectmen would,
well, that's who to sign, but I think Gus's point is on the
And I think
disbursements.
Christine's name is on there, isn't it? Is that the one that Christine
No.
has?
It's
Blank.
addressed to Mike, the letter's addressed to Mike. And then,
There's no signatory on the, was it the third
No one's
page?
designated on the
Third
form.
page, there's nobody authorized signatory name, and then at the back of this package, there's a bunch of pages
like for the project
that
manager
call out
forms.
the project, who's managing the project. There's an MEMA subrecipient pre-award risk assessment questionnaire. It's not answered. It's supposed to be signed, dated. There's a Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act compliance form. Should have been signed and dated.
Yeah, so let's send this one back, everyone, and get that other stuff filled in. It looks like on the schedule in here, this doesn't have to start until October 15th, so if we put this off to the 16th, we should be fine. Because the select and hire a vendor doesn't have to be completed until December 15th, and convene local hazard mitigation. I just wouldn't want us to lose the grant, but it looks like we won't lose the grant if we do that, so let's get that
Okay.
updated. All right. Selectmen are requested to vote to authorize me to sign 2 federal procurement notifications. First for the storm of March 2nd and 3rd, $45,000, and the second for the storm of March 13th and 14th, 2018, for $149,000. Town to receive 75%.
I really hate being a contract curmudgeon here, but these are 2 blank forms. There's nothing here.
yeah, I apologize. That's what I was talking about before when I said it was a snow emergency and it was, it would go back to the, to reduce the snow deficit if it came this year. The other one that you were talking about was the boiler project, which did take 5 years, I think so.
Yeah.
But
But this is just,
this would, I would say,
it's a blank form.
yeah, I would say it would be the the treasurer collector,
No,
because.
this is a completely blank form. It doesn't call out amounts, purpose. This is like just a form. There's 2 copies, so there's nothing that calls out the amount. There's nothing to sign. It's a contract, I don't think. I went through it looking to see if there was anything in this form that was different on one and the other. And as far as I can tell, it's just the form.
So can we get these filled in?
Yep, I depended upon Donna to
Okay.
have it ready.
If we could get those filled in, then we can do those on the 15th, 16th as well.
Yeah, it's too bad because she said FEMA's waiting for them now.
Well, if you want to authorize the chairman to sign, and then we'll get him the contract, and
Happy
he
to
can
do that.
review
Yeah,
it.
that's
Yeah,
fine.
sure. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. You might have to
Okay.
send it to me in Chicago. but-
Yeah.
You can authorize me to sign, you can leave it in there, I can come on the weekend and do it. So that's fine. If we get the stuff filled in, I can come and sign it. Does that work? That
Yep,
works for me.
yep. So I move that we authorize Chairman Marcucci to sign both of the federal procurement notifications, one covering the first storm on March 2nd and 3rd, 2018 for $45,000. The second for the storm on March 13th and 14th of 2018 for $149,000, I guess to be reimbursed, the town to be reimbursed at 75% of each of those amounts, totaling $112,000, once Chairman Marcucci is provided with completed notifications that specify that information.
You have a second? All in favor?
Yep.
All right, we are requested to vote to grant permission of the town clerk for the use of the Chenery Meeting Room to conduct early voting from October 22nd, 2018 to November 2nd, 2018. The following hours, Monday through Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Do we have a motion?
I move, any objection, nobody's got heartburn about that?
I think this is what we usually do.
Okay, I move that we grant permission to the town clerk to use the Chenery Meeting Room to conduct early voting from October 22nd, 2018 to November 2nd, 2018, between the hours of 8:30 and 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday through Thursday, and 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Friday.
Second?
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
All right. Consent agenda, any objections to any of the items on the consent agenda?
No.
Nope. Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the items on the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Acceptance or correction of minutes for April 12th and August 14th.
But we don't have those.
Oh, we don't have those, then we'll
No.
move on. Town administrator update.
Just want to say I'd like to thank all the people that helped get the warrant to you for signature tonight. It was quite a project, and there were a lot of people, town clerk, Evelyn, Chris, the accounting department, so it was quite a job. Other than that, I'd say that's about it at this time of night.
Thank you. Selectmen reports. Pete.
I did meet with the Energy Committee last Thursday, and most of the discussion was around the streetlight contract that ended up here tonight. Also, if you look around town, the streetlights have already been swapped out in the parking lots at the school. That was part of the Green Communities grant money that Jerry McCarty worked on before he left. And the other thing that the Energy Committee is looking at is finishing the spending of the monies from that $148,000 Green Communities grant that we got. And once they finish that spending, then they can try to get in line for the next round of grants from DOER, which I think the starting time on those is in December, and the grants maybe have to be in March or something of that sort of time frame. The other thing that I've been involved with is the Medfield Foundation is actually, the Medfield Foundation Legacy Fund is actually going through its initial inaugural round of grant making. We're actually meeting tomorrow night to hear the pitches from the people that have been invited to ask for grants. And so that's an exciting thing for the town, that there's going to be this grant money coming through. That's it.
I guess on the town business side, you saw the results of what the State Hospital Development Committee's been doing, but we did have a meeting last week and hammered that out. I actually impressed that the committee put that RFI together with 2 meetings and some work behind the scenes with a couple people working together to get that and the list of developers. So I'm just going along for the ride on that one. Those guys are doing a lot of heavy lifting on trying to pull that together. The senior housing survey ad hoc committee also got together, and we basically discussed how to take that report, the next steps forward from the initial draft that Barbara had, and the target is to get a draft report done by the end of this month. The only reason I'm calling that a hope is because, in many ways, Barbara and Dick Scolari are the ones that are kind of doing all the heavy lifting on that. So we're hoping to be able to have that thing pulled together by the end of the month. So that's another thing that I think will be helpful information for us to have. What we're coming up with is consistent with kind of what the preliminary points that I made before, but we'll have more depth and more insight, and also some ideas about what the future, we're not trying to specify the future, but we're trying to paint a picture of how it might line up given the magnitude of what we need. So we're hoping to have it by the end of the month. On a less formal basis, I went to that Neponset Valley Chamber of Commerce legislative gathering last week at the Endicott Estate. It was fun to go there. I'm not quite sure why we got invited, because and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that what they're doing is that Neponset Valley, it's a nice thing they do. The Chamber of Commerce holds a gathering of selectmen and the state legislators to just kind of informally have a beer and talk about things. It's actually a nice thing to have done, but because I'm not from that group, it was a little, I wound up talking to one of the chairman, the selectmen from Canton, which was nice, but it was different. I bailed out of that one early because I wanted to try to get to the MARAC briefing, and I got there about 7:25. The briefing started at 6:30. By the time I got to the Legion, the parking lot was dark. The building was locked up and everyone was gone. I did see Jessica Riley put a post on, because she was there, I think, for the first half hour, and got some general information, which I think the two of you actually know about as much as she would have covered. But it sounds like there were very few people there. It was only directed to the abutters. And I see there's another follow-up information session on, is it this Thursday or a week from Thursday?
Yeah, so that, are you done with that?
I am done.
Okay, 'cause
Yeah.
I'll kick off my.
I'm not done. Well,
No, no.
I'll come back. I have one last, I'm done about that, but you can come back. The only other point I wanted to make is I got an email from Christine passing on the delivery of the baby in the parking lot of the fire station.
Mario.
Mike Harmon and Tom Cronin. And the only point I'd make is you get 99% of the time, the public safety folks are having a relatively routine day. And that other 1% of the time, suddenly you get like your end of graduation, your final exam, all compressed in 1 hour, and it's impressive.
It's a crisis calm job.
Yeah, and it's impressive to know that things like that can happen in totally unexpected ways. And we have people in this town that know how to handle that and handle it well.
A couple of weeks ago.
Was it a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, they pulled into the parking lot, like, mom wasn't
Friday,
feeling well.
on Friday.
And had delivered the baby right there in the public safety building.
Yeah, it says on Friday,
Yeah.
so just last week.
Yeah, so we got a
You want to read
letter.
the report? On
Yeah.
Friday, Lieutenant Mike Harmon and firefighter Tom Cronin delivered a baby boy, Mario, in the parking lot of the fire station. This is a report from Chief Carrico. Apparently, the woman and her husband pulled into the parking lot as she was not feeling well. It became immediately apparent she was delivering the baby right there. There were some minor complications of the baby not breathing at first. Falling back on their training, they were able to get the baby breathing. If it were not for the quick actions of these two members, the outcome could have been different. And then I have the police see the attached emails from the Westwood Fire Department commenting on the incident. So it's good to know we've got people like that in town.
Well done.
That's it.
So just following up on Gus's report on the Legion, there is an Affordable Housing Trust Board meeting this Thursday, 7:30 PM at the DPW. There will be a presentation about the Legion, but I think even more exciting, this may be the inaugural implementation of our new remote participation policy for a committee meeting, because one member of the board will be participating remotely, probably via FaceTime, or whatever else Sarah decides Thursday during this meeting. So we will see how that procedure works. And this will be, we just got, I think we just got sent to us this afternoon, a layout of the plans and the schematics for, it's still the same 56 number that was in the other notice, and I think there's certain things in there for the Legion as well. The community room will be named for the Beckwith Post, and the Legion will have use of the community room at this facility. So that is Thursday at 7:30. The other thing we'll be doing on Thursday night is completing the transition of responsibility for the affordable housing issues from the Affordable Housing Committee to the Affordable Housing Trust Board. Steve Nolan and the other members of the Affordable Housing Committee have been very helpful in transitioning. We have Medfield as a community development corporation that was used to develop Allendale, transitioning the members of that corporation to members of the Affordable Housing Trust Board. It's not a town entity, it's a separate corporation, and that's kind of streamline that process. And kind of in going through that process with Steve, it put my mind to something else, a couple of other things. I would like to think about it. We don't have to decide it tonight, but I think we should give some kind of formal thanks and recognition to the Medfield Affordable Housing Committee, and both their current members, but the committee as an institution that has obviously done a lot of good work in town over a long period of time. And so I don't know if a certificate is the right way to go, some formal recognition of the board, thanks. The second thing it puts me in mind is we do have to, and I know there's a whole list of things to do, we do have to get the letters together and out to all the members of the committees who are leaving, based on the action we had last summer to disband certain committees. I think we want to send a letter to them, thanking them for their time on those committees. I don't want to lose sight of that. And I know there's been a ton of stuff for folks to do, but that's something we got to get done. And then the third thing that put me in mind is that, whether there is also some formal recognition we ought to offer to the members of the Medfield City Hospital Master Planning Committee and Resource Committee and others, in light of the extraordinary amount of time and effort that they put into it. It's really they went above and beyond really any committee that's in my experience in town. And I think, again, whether that's some sort of resolution or certificate or other kind of formal thing we can do, I think we should think about that and how best to do it. Obviously, I don't think there's anything we can do that would actually compensate them for that effort, but I think there should be some formal recognition of all that they did and the work product they produced. So that's my,
Good idea.
so think about that. And finally, I did, as I mentioned earlier, went to an information session at the center last Wednesday for the senior housing overlay district. It was, I think it was relatively lightly attended. There was a good discussion about what it is we'll be able to accomplish with the overlay district and with the Hinckley property and what we won't be able to accomplish. And I think kind of the takeaway that I got and the message that I try to convey to the folks there is that there's a very big bucket of need. This is sort of a couple of drops in the bucket, but it's a place where we can start and actually try to see if we can pull this off. So, and then we have the lingering lip proposal on Adams Street. I think I'm going to schedule that for one of our meetings after the special town meeting. So, and developer is fine with that timing as well. So we don't have a date yet. So it won't be before the special town meeting. That's all I have for my report. Anything else? Do we want to go into executive session for the purpose of talking about? So, let's see, I declare that it is in the interest of the town for us to go into executive session to discuss strategy for preparations for negotiations with non-union personnel, to discuss and possible vote on compensation, other terms and conditions of the employment agreement to be offered to new town administrator Christine Truweiler, and I determined that conducting those discussions in an open session will be to the detriment of the town's negotiating position. Good night, Colleen. Good night, Bill.
Good night, Bill. I move that the Medfield Board of Selectmen go into executive session for the following purposes. To discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body and the chair so declares. Did I get that one right?
Yep. Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Chairman Marcucci,
Yes.
Chairman Peterson, Selectman Peterson.
Third member Peterson, yes.
Third member, yes, and Selectman Murby, yes.
And the session will not, the open session will not
And
resume.
the open session will not reconvene at the conclusion of the executive session. I was scrambling trying to find those sheets. A little discombobulated today.
It's all right.